Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, May 6, 2014. It's 6:30 p.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Mayor and City Council. Would you please rise and join me in a Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz?
Here.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo?
Here.
Councilmember Ferguson?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember McGuire?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the April 15th business meeting and the April 29th council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion for approval?
Move approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 2, proclamation recognizing May as Civility Month.
Mr. Reichman?
You're on. I'm on.
Whereas the open exchange of public discourse is essential to the democratic system of government, and whereas a cornerstone of democracy, Americans observe certain rules of behavior generally known as civility, and whereas civility, derived from the Latin words civitas, meaning city, and civis, meaning citizen, is behavior worthy of citizens living in a community or in common with others. And whereas displays of anger, rudeness, ridicule, impatience, and a lack of respect and personal attacks detract from the open exchange of ideas, prevent fair discussion of the issues, and can discourage individuals from participation in government. And whereas civility can assist in reaching consensus on diverse issues and allow for mutually respectful ongoing relationships. And whereas civility can uplift our daily life and make it more pleasant to live in an organized society. And whereas the city, county, and local government law section of the Florida Bar urges the adoption of a pledge of civility by all citizens in the state of Florida. Whereas by the City Council of the City of Palm Coast that the month of May is proclaimed as Civility Month, and that it calls upon its citizens to exercise civility towards each other. Signed this 6th day of May, 2014, City of Palm Coast, John Netz, Mayor. Did you have something to say?
He speaks.
Mayor, I guess a lot of people would think it ironic that you would ask an attorney to comment on a proclamation asking for civility of citizens, but I'll try to say that I'm very proud. I'm very proud to be able to have say that I've been working with the city for over 6 years now, and during this entire period of time, I have enjoyed working with your staff and your charter officers and with all of you and your predecessors for the betterment and the benefit of the citizens and taxpayers. And I'm proud that this leadership, the city leadership, has conducted itself in a professional, ethical, and civil manner. And I mean that sincerely. And I've worked in a lot of local governments in a lot of cities, and I cannot think of a local government that is governed in a manner that is more consistent than this resolution. So,
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 3, a proclamation recognizing May 4th through May 10th as Public Service Recognition Week.
Good evening. This week, the City of Palm Coast and its BAM team, which stands for Boosting All Morale, is thanking city employees for their hard work all year during Public Service Recognition Week. In addition to tonight's proclamation and video, later this week we will be having an employee recognition luncheon to honor 37 employees who have reached longevity milestones of 5, 10, 20, 25, 30, and 40 years of service to Palm Coast. The proclamation will be accepted by Captain Ron Petrillo from the Fire Department, who has served Palm Coast for 25 years. After reading the proclamation, we will show a video highlighting 22 letters sent in by private citizens from Palm Coast, letters showing that our residents notice and appreciate the efforts of our employees. These letters were selected from a group of about 50 to 60 letters on a variety of topics across city departments. So at this time, it looks like I was going to ask Captain Petrillo to come up and all the employees, but I think we're set. So I'll turn it over to Councilman McGuire, and then I'll take a picture afterward.
Whereas Americans are served every single day by public servants at the federal, state, county, and city levels, these unsung heroes do the work that keeps our nation working. And whereas public employees take not only jobs but oaths, and whereas many public servants, including military personnel, police officers, firefighters, border patrol officers, embassy employees, healthcare professionals, and others risk their lives each day in service to the people of the United States and around the world. And whereas public servants include teachers, doctors, nurses, train conductors, astronauts, safety inspectors, laborers, computer technicians, social workers, and countless other occupations. Day in and day out, they provide with dignity and integrity the diverse services of their government demanded by the American people. And whereas without these public servants at every level, continuity would be impossible in a democracy that regularly changes its leaders and elected officials. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Palm Coast does hereby recognize May 4 through May 10, 2014 as Public Service Recognition Week. All citizens are encouraged to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of government employees at all levels, federal, state, county, and city. Signed this 6th day of May, 2014, City of Palm Coast, Florida, John Netz, Mayor.
Would you like to do a photo? We'll do a photo over here. Come on up. Want to get this deal behind you.
You be careful.
All right.
Squeeze together, guys.
You're going to have to form two rows and push together like each other. All right, I'm going to take a couple. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
I've been encouraged to say a few words, so I will. On behalf of my fellow employees, I would like to thank you once again for honoring us today. It's a wonderful presentation, and thank you very much for your continued support. Thank you.
And now we have the video.
Hi, I'm Jim Landon, your city manager, here with the BAM team. We're here to say a big thank you for all the great work you've done throughout the years. Recently, we've recognized the fact that many of our residents will send nice letters about a job well done that recognizes the excellent work of all of our employees and the teamwork in making this a better community. So right now, we'd like to share some of those nice comments and let you know what our residents think about you.
As many of you might guess, there are a lot of dirty jobs performed by city employees, but that doesn't prevent them from doing a great job.
Mrs. Biggums writes, I would like to thank Mr. Ralph Hand for eliminating the terrible odor we were having in our home. Ew. It's always good to know there are some people who take pride in their job. Thanks again.
Susan Heron writes, Eric, the employee who was dispatched to help me, was very polite. very knowledgeable, and even explained what I would need to do in order to repair the cracked pipe that caused the problem. I wanted to write to let you know you have an exceptional employee who made this terrible experience more tolerable for me.
Christine Murphy wrote, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the good work of your staff. Linda Honschel was very patient. Water was gurgling in my kitchen sink. The project was finished this morning. Your teamwork is commendable, and you worked with efficiency that I didn't know still existed. For them, it seemed par for the course, but for me, it felt like they were saving my life. I thank everyone involved.
Marilyn Mann writes, on Good Friday, there was sewage coming up in my yard. 2 employees showed up with a vac truck. They both were excellent city representatives, answering questions, smiling, and cheerful. Truly what you want the citizens to see in a city employee. I'd like to thank both them and their supervisor for such good work and professionalism.
Michael Mullis writes, I bring accolades to those who provide the working backbone to this fine city. Please share my gratitude to the hard-working utility department that fixed a sunk PEP tank issue on my property. Since I have moved here 8 years ago, I have always and will always love my city. We do live and work with some of the finest. It gives me a good sense of pride living in Palm Coast.
Many thank you letters to the city originate from circumstances beyond employees' job descriptions. Whether it takes compassion or just the right thing to do, our employees are the best.
Vivian Singleton writes, I commend employee Wayne Douglas for arranging for an envelope containing an important document to be returned to me after I inadvertently lost it at the Indian Trail Sports Complex. It is great to know that the City of Palm Coast has in its employment such a diligent worker. I wish him well in his future endeavors with the city.
Michael Guerrero writes, just a note of thanks to members of the water department. 2 nights ago, water backed up from the sewer pipes outside my house, necessitating an emergency call. They went above their duties to assist a citizen. In an era when it is easy to say, it's not my job, I applaud their initiative, deportment, and promptness.
Kent Ryan writes, I would like to thank Mike Marinelli and C.J. Johnson for handling the tree situation on our campus on New Year's Eve. I received a call advising that a tree was leaning toward Culver, and before we could send anyone from Daytona, your staff secured the site by cutting the palm tree down so that it would not fall into the road. It is so nice to have employees who go that extra mile, especially on the eve of New Year's.
Vernon Orndorff writes, a big thank you to your team for an outstanding job responding to the damage the storm caused. The actions of your team put into place in restoring normality in my children's lives goes way beyond any words I can express. The city employees have been so helpful. Their professionalism goes beyond any expectations. Please pass the word that they are deeply appreciated in all they do.
Maria Francescan writes, a crew from the Palm Coast Fire Department, I believe Station 21, responded to a call from my father at Bayside Drive for a burst water pipe. My dad, who is in his early 80s and still lives at home with my mom, who is 85 and has dementia, could not believe how fast they responded and how much help the crew gave him in trying to clean up the mess. I send you all my sincere thanks for being so responsive and helpful when they were in need.
Patrick Giuliano writes, Mrs. Amy Dumont stopped by Station 24 today with tears of gratitude for our Engine 24 B-Shift crew. Earlier in the month, B-Shift responded to her home for a minor injury. In the process of treating Mrs. Dumont, she shared her story of how she just lost her husband of 60 years this past August. On Wednesday morning, Engine 24, Lieutenant Cohen, Firefighter Robinson, Firefighter Cottle delivered a birthday cake and a card to Mrs. Dumont. She was overwhelmed. She told me, this was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. This completely restored her faith in mankind. She wanted to thank the crew for their kindness, their thoughts, and the delicious birthday cake.
Whether in the field or in the office, city employees are always focused on taking care of its customers. Residents are our priority one.
Bonnie Hobbs writes, wish to thank the City of Palm Coast and all the people involved with the repairs. We really appreciate your expertise and the thoughtfulness all crews showed throughout the project, being caring about personal property and landscaping. Thank you for your excellent work from beginning to end.
Philip U. writes, I went to the Frida Zamba pool today and signed up my 2 children for one of your summer camps. I would like to acknowledge the good customer service of your employee, Irene. She provided excellent customer attention, answered all my questions, and left me fully confident in your summer camp program.
Tina Jackway writes, Dear Miss Lauren, just a great big thank you for the wonderful class this evening. Your talents are fantastic. I look forward to seeing you and attending the next class. So very pleased, as my daughter was also. Thanks for clearing up Pinterest for me. Great explanation.
Dan Nagy writes, my wife and our dog are attacked by 4 dogs. Deputy Sapp and Miss Eva should be commended for their work. This may have been viewed as a routine animal complaint by your department, but it was very traumatic to my wife. Both my wife and I appreciate the concerted effort displayed and was greatly satisfied with how this matter was resolved. Again, thank you.
Hank O'Connell writes, I had a problem with a tree that had fallen along the canal in the back of my home. Both Judy and Don went out of their way to be of service to me. I would like to thank them both for their kindness and proficiency. It's nice to know there are people like them working for Palm Coast.
Dr. Rita Heron writes, my 7-year-old son and I participated in the Starlight Run Walk. Bad weather was coming, and we hurried the last mile. When we came across the finish line, my husband and mother were there to tell us that a tornado warning had been called and that everything was over. I want to applaud you for that call, for the mutual aid agreement that you have with the surrounding areas. Thank you for thinking of the citizens first and foremost.
Providing great customer service doesn't just build temporary relationships, but goes a long way towards creating lasting impressions.
Ed Derling writes, I would like to tell you about outstanding courtesy and service by a member of the utility department. He listened to my concerns about odors outdoors, laid out the problems, and the plans for correcting them. I come from the Pittsburgh area. It's been my experience dealing with government agencies can be difficult and frustrating. If Mr. Ralph Hand is any indication, I see that Palm Coast will be totally different. In my opinion, there needs to be more praise for jobs well done.
William Deliker writes, a special thanks to you and the many dedicated technology experts from Palm Coast FiberNet. It's exciting to see the smiles on faces of our local staff at the noticeable improvement in network performance since the new circuit was turned up. We're delighted that local government had the vision to invest in our community's business future and to make FiberNet a reality.
Bruce Van Dusen writes, there was a problem with our pep tank today. Anthony responded. It was a small problem, but he took care of things and scheduled a follow-up. The reason I'm writing is he probably has the best customer service, I'm here to help attitude that I've seen from anyone, public or private, in some time. He was simply terrific.
Robert Gretsch writes, your medical rescue personnel responded to the home of my parents. Your personnel discovered my father passed out on the floor of his bedroom and quickly revived him. The Gretsch family want to sincerely thank you and your personnel for their expert medical care, courtesy, and dedication. It gives us great comfort to know our parents are protected by the men and women of your fine department. Please extend our gratitude to all the personnel involved in this matter.
Patrick McGuire Jr. writes, I discovered a start of a sinkhole in my yard. City employees worked in the rain 2 of the 3 days and worked very hard to complete the job. This city has great parks, beautiful medians, well-maintained roads, great drainage system, and I could continue with many other things that made me decide to live here. However, our truly greatest asset is the employees that build and maintain our parks, roads, drainage systems. I request you notify their supervisor of my complete satisfaction of the work and the professionalism of the employees.
The positive comments you just heard made me feel very proud. City Council wants to join me in saying a big thank you for a job well done.
Job well done.
Yeah. And I want to thank Myrna and the BAM team. She's been the leader for about a couple of years now for recognizing employees and putting this together, and really it's been a great week. We're having breakfast. The executive team is serving pancakes for everybody. I get to squirt the syrup. That's a lot of fun this week and everything. So Myrna, thank you, and to the whole BAM team. Appreciate it.
Any council member want to make any comments? Is enough said?
Enough said. Thank you.
Agenda item number 4, proclamation recognizing May 2014 as Drug Court Month.
I think we did. I'm Judge Walsh. Glad to be here. Thank you, Mayor Nets.
Judge, thank you.
I think I'm going to use this one.
Okay.
Whereas drug courts are an effective tool for reducing substance abuse and crime in our criminal justice system. And whereas for 25 years, drug courts have been restoring lives, reuniting families, and making communities across the nation safe through 2,840 operational drug courts. And whereas drug courts facilitate community-wide partnerships, bringing together public safety and public health professionals in the fight against drug abuse and criminality. Whereas research shows that drug courts are demonstrably effective and significantly improve substance abuse treatment outcomes, substantially reduce drug abuse, crime, and do so at a lower cost than any other public justice strategy. And whereas Flagler County Adult Drug Court began in 2006, 90 people have graduated from this program. And whereas 75% of Flagler County Adult Drug Court graduates had no new felony charges, and 92% of graduates had no new drug charges. And whereas the judges, attorneys, treatment and rehabilitation professionals, court personnel, and others dedicated to drug courts and similar programs are healing families in this community. And whereas the City Council of the City of Palm Coast recognizes the successful work of the practitioners and drug court participants to reduce the impact of drug abuse in our community. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Palm Coast hereby recognizes May 2014 as Drug Court Month and urges all citizens to recognize the significant contributions of drug courts and congratulate this year's drug court graduates. Signed the 6th day of May 2014, City of Palm Coast, Florida, John Netz, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Mayor Nets, it's a pleasure to come back this year. We were here last year for a similar proclamation. What's different this year is we're now celebrating the 25th anniversary of drug courts in this country. Drug courts began here in Florida, and it's National Drug Court Month this month of May. And I have with me some great members of my team, Mr. Mike Grenier, our drug court coordinator, Ms. Janet Johnson, and Mr. Robert Mogar from Break the Cycle. There are a lot of other folks that couldn't be here tonight but wish they were. I'm very proud of being able to preside in drug court, and thank you. I think we provide a great service for the community. We're real happy to be here. So thank you for this proclamation.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, sir. Oh, yes, thank you. Photograph.
Photo op.
Thank you.
Judge. I'd just like to add my 2 cents. Having had the opportunity to attend a number of drug court graduations and actually to be the keynote speaker at one of them, I would encourage everybody, if you can, attend at least one. It is probably one of the most moving and the most memorable occasions you'll see. The graduates will tell you how many days they've been clean. They will tell you about their lives in their own words before drug court and how drug court has changed their lives. And oftentimes they'll be there with family members, parents, siblings, children, and it is really just remarkable to see how effective this program is. The drug courts are on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. It's not the best time, or 4 o'clock, not the best time in the world, but if you find out that there's one coming up, I would encourage you at least once in your life, go to a drug court graduation. You will be moved.
Mayor Nets, June 20th is the next graduation.
June 20th. Thank you. There you put it in your calendars. Agenda item number 5, presentation honoring and recognizing Juan Bostwick becoming a U.S. citizen.
Well, we've just been talking a lot about employees, and this week being our recognition week, and we have a rare opportunity to celebrate something very special, is that Juan Bostwick, who is a stormwater engineer in our engineering and stormwater department, is our newest U.S. citizen here in Palm Coast. And this is Juan. Juan is originally from Nassau in the Commonwealth of Bahamas, and he was one of 81 people from 30 different countries who took their oath during the naturalization swearing-in ceremony in Orlando at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And Mr. McGuire and Mr. Moden were among his friends and family who were able to attend, and Mr. McGuire has often quizzed Juan to get ready for the big test. So Juan's been with the city since 2003. He was our first development review engineer, and then when the city took on the drainage functions from Palm Coast Community Service Corp in 2005, that's when engineering and stormwater began, and at that time he became the city's stormwater engineer. And his next steps after receiving this honor tonight from Mayor Netz are to vote in his first U.S. election in the Palm Coast primary this August. So congratulations, Juan. And here's the mayor.
Whereas throughout our American history, immigrants have embraced the spirit of liberty, equality, and justice for all, guided by our founders as they built a stronger republic. And whereas the American spirit and character have prevailed in the face of adversity with courage and conviction time and time again, and whereas the title of United States citizen is a much coveted title around the world, as thousands of people go to great lengths to come to this great land to live and build their lives, and whereas the people of the United States enjoy the blessings of liberty, the guarantees of the Bill of Rights, equal protection under the laws of the Constitution, and the freedom derived from it, and whereas Juan Bostwick, employee of the City of Palm Coast, has freely and willingly performed all of the requirements of naturalization, and whereas Mr. Bostwick's naturalization process required his patience, time, and dedication, and as a person of strong moral character, he performed his requirements with skill and devotion. And whereas Mr. Bostwick is hereby recognized for his eagerness to contribute his time and his willingness to participate in Palm Coast community events as an integral part of our community, now therefore be it recognized that the Mayor and City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, hereby recognize, honor, and congratulate our esteemed colleague and friend, Juan Bostwick, as he is formally inducted as a citizen of the United States of America, and wish him success as he moves forward with his duties and responsibilities as an American citizen. And it was my privilege and pleasure to sign this the 6th day of May, 2014. John Netz, Mayor.
Pardon?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow councilmen, our favorite city manager, our favorite city attorney. I can't, words can't express how I feel. I am very grateful for the opportunity here to work here at Palm Coast, and this is a very historic event for me. But more than just it being history, I will continue to do my best to make a difference in this country. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Agenda item number 6, part of our ongoing budget preparation. presentation on the overview of fund accounting. Mr. Landon, you want to introduce this one?
Yes, Mayor, City Council, each year we go through a series of steps as we prepare for this upcoming budget season. One of the things that we find is that our accounting system is actually quite complicated. So Chris and Lena has put together a little presentation to try to help explain the accounting process we have to go through, or system. So hopefully people understand it a little better. So take it from here, Chris.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to ask Lena to go ahead and do the presentation for us today. Well, that's about as exciting as this presentation is going to get. Okay, I just want to start out with a reminder of our budget preparation timeline. A lot of people are surprised to find out that it's a lengthy process that actually starts in January of every year. We're currently in our May section of the budget preparation process, and today's fund accounting presentation is what we'll be talking about. Of course, the presentations and the workshops go through July, August, with the final public hearings in September. The actual budget preparation timeline is on the city's website. It looks just like that little green box there, right on the main city's website, and it'll get updated as we continue down the path after each council workshop and council meeting.
Yeah, Chris, I want to thank you for that. I think that's a real good tool.
Thank you. It was a great suggestion. So an overview of what we'll be talking about are the varied regulatory authorities that the city has to deal with in its accounting systems. Basically, what is fund accounting, a brief discussion of the revenues that cause us to have to use fund accounting, and again, to finish up with our tentative budget calendar. So there are a number of regulatory authorities that we have to abide by regulations, not the least of which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board that directs how we prepare our financial statements and our books and records. The federal government plays a heavy role, not only in payroll taxes, but certainly in debt issuance, heavily in grant compliance, as well as yellow book auditing, which has a lot to do with grant auditing. And then again, the state government, both the Department of Revenue and rules of the Auditor General, our truth and millage or TRIM rules and regulations, against state grant compliance, and there's a number of annual reporting requirements to the state on the financial condition of the city. So what is fund accounting? And that's the official definition. It's basically a system for segregating financial resources to demonstrate legal compliance with restrictions or other special purposes. And what is a fund? I'm not going to read that large definition, but a fund basically is a separate set of books. We have a number of funds. It's a separate set of books to account for those restricted resources separately. There are a number of different fund types. The three primary fund types that the city utilizes are governmental funds, proprietary funds, and fiduciary funds. The items highlighted in blue are the funds that we currently make use of. The items that are in black we currently don't have a use for, but may in the future. Fund balance, we talk a lot about fund balance or fund reserve. That's basically the excess of revenues over expenditures accumulated over time. It tends to be used for emergencies or one-time expenditures and really are not meant to fund continuing operations. As such, the City Council has established a fund balance policy on how to use those reserves and when to use those reserves and how much the reserve should be for all of our main operating funds, which is a general fund and utility fund, as well as a number of our other key funds. And in fact, we made some changes to the fund balance policy within the last month or two. As a general rule, the primary fund classifications, governmental funds are funds that are primarily supported by tax revenues. Proprietary funds, a rule of thumb, is they're primarily supported by user fees. And trust funds are simply not the city's money. It's money that we get on behalf of another entity where we have a requirement to do the accounting for those funds. So different governmental funds that we have and functions that are served by governmental funds. The general fund is the largest of which covers all the city council, administration, finance, costs, the Planning and Code Enforcement Divisions of Community Development, Fire and Law Enforcement, Engineering, Parks and Recreation, as well as a large portion of Public Works that relates to streets maintenance, parks facilities, and general facilities maintenance. We do have Capital Projects Fund, a governmental capital projects fund. Some of the projects that are currently in that fund that we've been talking about over the last several months, for instance, are like the Longs Landing or Longs Creek Nature Preserve. We have a number of special revenue funds. There's really no limit on how many of these you can have, but each one of these, again, is a separate set of books to keep track of a specific funding source that has some kind of restriction on them, both internal and external. Again, our proprietary funds, which are primarily fees for services. We do have 2 internal service funds, which are like separate business entities under the umbrella of the city, which is our fleet fund and our health insurance fund, primarily charges for services to other city departments. And then our enterprise funds, which are primarily charges for services to citizens and users, our IT fund, our golf and tennis course fund, which are pay-per-play funds, our building permits fee fund, which funds the entire operations of the building permits function, stormwater fund and solid waste fund, again, pay per use, and the utility fund, of course, for the water and sewer utility. Our loan fiduciary fund is the Volunteer Firefighters Pension Fund. It's a trust fund. Funds flow to the city through the fire insurance premium taxes charged by to citizens in Palm Coast. The program is heavily administered by the state, and it's for the benefit of the volunteer firefighters. Again, we are required to keep track of this, but it's not actually the city's money. This slide is one that we use at Citizens Academy, and in fact, we used last night, trying to describe why funds are important, why all the different funds and the fund accounting, and to explain the different external requirements that we have based on our revenue sources. So some examples of restricted or quasi-restricted revenue sources are the small county surtax. Utility revenues have restrictions on them. Of course, impact fees can only be used for improvements related to growth. And grants, of course, whatever funds we get for grants are very specific as to their use. I want to just mention a number of unrestricted revenue sources, and this just means these are revenue sources that the City Council can designate how they're spent. There's no external hand guiding how these are spent. Property taxes are the largest single revenue source. We have other ones like the business tax receipts, so the local business tax receipt, our communication service taxes, franchise fees, the half-cent sales tax program, a portion of the state revenue sharing, any net revenues from the code enforcement or red light cameras, and of course the public service or utility tax, which is not a tax currently levied in Palm Coast. There are a lot of...
Chris, can you go back for a second to clarify something for me? Can be used for general purposes and at the discretion of the governing body.
Correct.
Code enforcement, red light camera revenues, we've said that they are to be used for safety improvements. In order for them to be used for anything else but that, would require the action of this body, would it not?
Yes. Any of these revenue sources in front of you require the action of City Council through budget appropriations.
But things like the ad valorem tax goes into the general fund. I mean, that's...
It goes into the general fund, but it can certainly be spread across multiple funds. And for instance, there is a small portion of the ad valorem taxes that are used for stormwater capital projects. Those determinations are made each year during the budget process and approved by City Council.
Have code enforcement red light camera funds ever been used for anything but safety improvements?
No, since we started receiving them, the net revenues, we pay any of our direct expenses from those revenues, and then the balance go into the Streets Improvement Fund for street safety improvements.
Thank you.
Chris, while you're on that previous slide, I'm unfamiliar with the state revenue sharing, a 73%. What does that refer to?
There's a state revenue sharing pot that the state puts various revenue sources that they receive to be redistributed back to local governments. That percentage changes a little each year. Approximately, let's say roughly 25% of it has a restriction on it, and the balance of it, or the roughly 75, or here just under 75%, it's up to City Council to determine how to use it.
So the 73 refers to the unrestricted portion of the state revenue share.
Yes.
Thank you.
So these are a number of state restricted revenue sources. Again, we talked about the fire insurance premium tax for the volunteer firefighters pension, fuel tax refund, the refund we get on fuel taxes the city pays to buy fuel, specifically for construction and road maintenance. Police automation and education funds have to be used for law enforcement. Recently, the City Council approved some of the police automation funds for the lapel cameras for the Sheriff's Office. Again, the building permit inspection fees are applied solely to building permit inspection costs. The local option fuel tax, as well as the smaller portion of the state revenue sharing, has to be used for transportation expenditures. Any of the tax increment revenue in the CRA has to be used in the CRA per the CRA plan. Again, impact fees relate to capacity improvements, any special assessments for the purpose of that actual assessment. And what we used to have, the infrastructure surtax that was recently expired, that one had a very specific purpose, and it was applied to the resurfacing of roads within Palm Coast. And again, that one is not currently utilized in Flagler County. Some other revenue restrictions, water and sewer charges are restricted by the bond covenants. It's a fairly lengthy restriction. Any money that's left over after those covenants are satisfied are at the purview of City Council. Again, we talked a little bit about the small county surtax. It's actually the Flagler County ordinance that enacted the tax that drives what that money can be utilized for. The stormwater management fee, again, has to be applied to the loan covenants first and then purview of City Council. And one of the locally restricted funds is our disaster reserve, which we've utilized a little bit with the Starlight tornado, is strictly a City Council determination. So back to our tentative budget calendar. Our next actual presentation in our series is the 27th, which is a new one, which is about long-term financial planning presentation. I'm looking forward to that one. That one will actually be exciting, I promise. June 10th, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about our tax sources that are non-property tax sources. Then we'll have our property tax primer at the end of June, towards the end of June. July, we have a lot of heavy lifting with a lot of our budget workshops, setting the preliminary millage rate, going through all the funds through August until we get to the final proposed budget presentation at the end of August. And again, September, tentatively the 3rd and 17th would be the public hearings for City Council to consider adoption of the budget. Any questions?
Council questions?
When does the property appraiser provide his, for want of a better term, suggested trim rate?
What the property appraiser supplies us with is the preliminary taxable value of the property in Palm Coast. We usually get that right around June 1st, and that will let us kind of know where our starting point is for determining what the preliminary millage rate would be.
Do you have any feel for it at this time?
I've been hearing it's going up, but I don't have a feel for a percentage.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 7, ordinance comprehensive plan amendment for subject properties better known as Grand Landings. Mr. Reichman.
Mr. Mayor, Council, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the City of Palm Coast 2035 Comprehensive Plan as previously amended. This is pursuant to Section 163, 31874 statutes, and amends the future land use map or flume designation for 774.4 more or less acres of certain real property from residential low-density rural estate, which is a Flagler County future land use designation, and commercial, to low-intensity Flagler County future land use designation, to residential and mixed use, which is the City of Palm Coast future land use designation, as described in more detail in the legal description, which is an exhibit to the ordinance. The subject property better known as Grand Landings, including a note on the future land use map to limiting the lands designated as residential to 749 residential units, and a note limiting non-residential use in the mixed use area to 150,000 square feet, providing for conflict ratification of prior acts, codification, severability, and providing for an effective date. This is a legislative matter, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is once again the second reading. The next item is actually the zoning. This is an existing development, and it really is a housekeeping, kind of cleaning up some of the language and features of this development, but nothing significantly new. Jose, although you've seen the full presentation with second reading, he's going to do a shorter version to just highlight where this is and what the impact of this proposal is.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. For the record, Jose Papa with the Community Development Department. The subject property was annexed, better known as Grand Landings, is located about a mile and a half south of State Road 100 and located on the west side of Seminole Woods Parkway. And Seminole Woods Parkway and State Road 100 is up here somewhere, and the Flagler County Airport is right about here. As in summary, this area was annexed into the city in 2007. It is composed of 774 acres, of which 749 acres are residential and 25 acres are proposed to be commercial area. As Mr. Landon said, this is a housekeeping item, and essentially what all we're doing here is changing the future land use map designations and zoning map designations from the county nomenclature to city nomenclature or city names. And we're doing that, again, trying to maintain the existing entitlements that were provided the property owner with the prior approval from Flagler County Board of County Commission. And so the future land use map amendment essentially is a change from the county designation of low-density residential to the city designation of residential. And there's a portion that in the county that was low-intensity commercial, and that would be changed to mixed use under a future land use designation. There was an approved planned unit development agreement for this parcel as approved by the Board of County Commission. And part of this approval, part of the items that you will be hearing tonight include the one where we changed that PUD agreement that was approved by the BOCC to an MPD agreement, which is our term for essentially the same type of zoning, planned unit development. Our equivalent zoning is master plan development. Again, tied with a development agreement that maintains basically the entitlements and development standards provided to the property owners. Again, there are no changes in the permitted uses and amenities. What we'll have is 749 units in the residential area. There's 150,000 square feet of neighborhood commercial that will be permitted with this development. There's an amenities center, a 14-acre dedicated parkland, which was again dedicated to Flagler County, but it's dedicated for use as a park. And the only difference, again, one of the difference that I should bring up is that in the area that's mixed use, there is the potential for the property owner to come back at a later time and amend their development agreement and request that residential uses be permitted within that mixed-use area. And essentially that mixed-use area is about here. And that's about a 26-acre site along Seminole Woods Parkway. So that's the portion that's to be designated mixed use. If it's developed for commercial, it'll be limited to 150,000 square feet. But again, the way our flume designation, mixed-use flume designation works, it does allow for residential uses, and with a change to the development agreement, the property owner can come back at a later time and request residential units for that portion.
Jose?
Yes, sir.
Did I read somewhere where when the population of Flagler County reaches 100,000 that they would be able to increase the number from 749 to 1,000 units?
Yes, sir. That's the DRI thresholds. In the state of Florida, there's things called developments of regional impact, and there are thresholds of development that trigger, and DRIs are a region-wide review of a project. This particular development now has approvals for 749 dwelling units. The note that we received from the regional council is that, of course, the threshold for a residential DRI is 749. So if they were to add another dwelling unit, they could potentially trigger that DRI review, and so they would be required to apply for a DRI, development of regional impact application, and that would be reviewed by multiple agencies. Some of them state, and it would allow Flagler County and the Department of Transportation and, again, other agencies to review that. But the key here is that the 749 units is for a straight residential development. What we have here essentially is a mixed-use development. There's the potential for commercial. So the thresholds will differ. But what the note said is that as population increases in the county, the threshold for DRIs do increase. So once Flagler County does hit a population of 100,000, that DRI threshold for residential moves from 749 to 1,000.
Without any further rigmarole in terms of ordinances or amendments or whatever?
Yeah, the DRI review process is a separate review process. It requires a development order and it's essentially coordinated by the regional council. The city does adopt a development order, but it's the regional council who coordinates that review. The application for DRI will be sent to the regional council, and they're the ones responsible for sending it out to the different agencies and local and state for comments and for review. But essentially, it does come back to the city, and it is council, it is us who issue a development order. Did I answer? Did I help? No.
Well, the reason I bring it up is it appears Flagler County is on the threshold of 100,000, and we're talking about 749 as if it's cast in stone. And I read this thing in here, and it looked a little out of place given what we're talking about. It looks like things are...
Sure, and I mentioned
I don't think the development is anywhere close to those numbers at the present time anyway, so I'm kind of making a big deal out of a smaller issue. But
sure.
That's the only reason for my point.
No, you're not. It's just that it was a note provided to us by the regional council, just basically to alert the city. Just remember, if your population is 100,000, there is this DRI threshold that you're about to cross or could cross if you add additional units to this project. And if you do that, then you might be required to do a DRI review. And again, that 749 is for just a straight residential development.
What you're approving tonight is 749.
Right.
DRIs are very, very expensive, very lengthy. This development, the chances of it wanting to go through that process is somewhere between slim and nil, in my opinion. So I think it's a comment, but it really is not something that I think you're going to see occur.
Maybe I can help a little bit, Mr. Ferguson. I am one of the representatives from Flagler County to the Northeast Regional Council. Northeast Regional Council consists of 7 counties, from Nassau County down to Flagler County, but it also has on its board representatives of the Department of Transportation, the Water Management District, the Council on Economic Opportunity. There are a whole host of governmental agencies that sit on this board. When a development reaches a certain size, the potential that it could affect surrounding counties increases. We might do something in Flagler County that might have an impact on St. Johns County or on Putnam County. So the entire regional council, 7 counties, their representatives, and the state agencies review this application. And as Mr. Landon said, it's complicated. It's another layer of governmental review. It's fairly expensive for the developer. Oftentimes, they would prefer not to have to go to DRI and just deal with it locally. But if they choose to go larger, then they open up this much expanded review process. You've got 4 representatives from Flagler County that serve on the Regional Planning Council. they represent Flagler County, but then you've got the same number from Putnam County, Duval County, Baker County, Clay County, St. Johns County. I don't know if that helps.
Okay. Yeah, I think, given the practicalities of the size of it and so on, I just saw that note, and I just wondered if, in fact, 749 automatically went to 1,000 by virtue of what we're doing here, once the population limit of threshold was attained at 100,000.
The threshold does adjust once the population increases.
It's up to the developer whether or not they want to trigger that threshold.
I got it. Okay.
But let's be clear, because I think the Flagler County population threshold does not increase the number of units.
Right.
It increases the threshold for review.
Yes, thank you. That is to be clear.
And they could, if they, right now, if they tried to come in and change that commercial to residential, tomorrow, I guess, since we're approving this today, tomorrow, if they did that, then they could fall under current DRI review. But if they wait or don't do it at all, or if they wait until after 100,000, then they would not fall under the current DRI review. They'd fall under the over 100,000 in your county DRI review.
That's correct. They won't trigger the...
And the number of units, if our current census is correct, the number of units in the development itself would break 100,000.
But
that's if nothing else was going on.
So the bottom line is that's why it's at 749, because 750 was going to trigger it.
Right.
So they wanted to keep under that because of the cost and that the, let's just say the cost.
Okay.
Other council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 7? If so, please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
My name is Jerry Finley, Finley Engineering Group. I'm the engineer for the developer. I have Jeff Douglas representing Citation Boulevard Investments with me tonight. We don't have any presentation, but we'll be happy to answer any questions you have on this and the following item.
Thank you. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting. Back to council. Additional questions, comments, a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire.
Yes.
Mayor Ness.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 8, an ordinance with a zoning map amendment and development agreement for the subject property, better known as Grand Landings. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the official zoning map as established in Section 2.06 of the City of Palm Coast Unified Land Development Code. This is amending the zoning designation for approximately 774 acres of subject property, better known as Grand Landings, from Plan Unit Development PUD, which is a Flagler County designation, to Master Plan Development MPD, City of Palm Coast zoning designation, more particularly depicted and described in Exhibit A, and whose parcel identification numbers are provided in Exhibit B, and approving development agreement as provided in Exhibit C, providing for severability, conflicts, non-codification, providing for an effective date. And, Mr. Mayor, this is the quasi-judicial corresponding rezoning, so if there were any ex parte communications since the first reading, that would be appropriate at this time for those to be disclosed.
Does anyone have any ex parte communications to divulge?
No, sir.
Hearing none. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, this is the second half of approval for the presentation that you just heard. We have nothing further to add at this time.
Council questions?
I have one question.
Mr. Ferguson.
Since this gentleman is here representing the development, I just wondered if, for the public's sake, you could talk about the state of the development and the future plan for what we might expect in terms of the changes or the development progress or prospect.
I'll let Jeff do that.
I've actually visited that property about 5 years ago and was led to believe that there could be an airport access to the back of the property or something, but I think those plans have since been changed.
Yes, sir. My name is Jeff Douglas, 267 Middle Way, New Smyrna Beach. Those plans have been, they're certainly not on our radar, and those plans, I believe that was a federal looking back in history, the feds said after 9/11, we don't want you taxiing airplanes from your house, or so it probably wasn't a good idea, and it's certainly not in our in our plans, even remotely so. As far as the future plans, addressing what your concerns were before, the fact, the layout of the current layout of the property and in the market is to achieve anything more than 749 at this time. We hope to have that issue, but we're years and years down the road from that. So we stepped into a situation where this project was in foreclosure, had been foreclosed upon. We had to get the project out of the ditch, and going. Housing starts were down to 70 permits a year in the city. It was pretty low. So, it's been an effort. The current residents have been wonderful to work with. I know they put up with a lot. We had the retention pond. We had issues. We had to fill the whole project with dirt. The lots were not filled. So, we've been working together. They've been patient, and, we wish, pending this, we can move forward with the amenity plans.
How many homes have been built, and how many are under construction currently?
I don't know. Currently built, there was 8 originally when we purchased it. There's probably been, 30 or 40 more permits built in the last year. We probably got 12 under construction. Those are estimates. I don't have them off the top of my head. But
Thank you.
So,
if I could add, it's actually one of the more active areas that we have in Palm Coast, and has quite I think a great deal of potential. Nice area, and seems to be
nice sidewalk there now,
nice.
also, right? Are under construction.
Yep. Oh, absolutely, along Seminole Woods. So.
Yes. By the way, thank you for the sidewalk.
Council questions? Seeing none, open the meeting to the public. Anyone to the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 8?
Jack Kyle, Palm Coast. With the airport increasing their landing areas and their takeoff areas, and inviting larger airplanes to come into the airport, which is because we have the second best tower arrangement. How is this going to affect this 749 units? Are we going to end up with a lot of complaints about noise and about my house being shaken by a large aircraft? What is this? Is this going to affect the airport, or is the airport going to affect them? That's what I would like to know. Thank you very much.
We'll get you an answer to that. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting, go back to council. You want to tackle that one, Mr. Landon?
Well, I'll start off by saying the main runway at the airport, Flagler County Airport, runs east-west up close to State Road 100, and this project is south. So the planes really don't fly over this development coming and going. Other than that, once again, it was approved in the county. Those kind of issues were looked at. In our opinion, you're actually going to have some other homes in existing Palm Coast neighborhoods that are impacted more by the airport than this development will. And Jose, pipe in if you'd like, as far as if you have a different opinion, but I don't think this residential development will impact the airport, and I don't think the airport will impact the residents.
I have nothing to add. Smart man.
This is not to say that a resident there might not complain about airplanes, but
absolutely,
the nature of the beast is the airport was there first. And I think, Mr. Landon, you hit on something that's important for everybody to understand, is that when you have a zoning, that conveys to that property certain rights, part of the bundle of rights that go with that property. When Flagler County zoned this property residential and commercial, that gave that property certain rights that cannot be removed. So what we're doing is simply bringing it in line with the terminology, the nomenclature, if you will, that Palm Coast uses. But you can't take away the rights that were bestowed upon that property. Council questions, comments, or a motion on agenda item number 8?
Move approval of agenda item number 8, a zoning map amendment and development agreement for subject property better known as Grand Landings.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire.
Yes.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 9, a resolution authorizing purchase of materials and associated expenses for the construction of 2 additional fields for expansion of the Indian Trail Sport Complex. Mr. Landon.
Now we get into the good stuff with Luann. A few years ago, the city developed our economic development plan, which we refer to as Prosperity 2021. And in that, we put a lot of emphasis on trying to attract visitors along with their dollars they spend when they're visiting places. And we found a real niche that's been very successful and I think exceeded most of our expectations, and that is the sports venue or sports visitors coming to town, particularly the tournaments and meets and a variety of other things. One of the central places for that is Indian Trail Sports Complex, along with our partners with the school district of Indian Trails Middle School. So successful that we have an opportunity to expand that complex with a couple more fields, and this is the proposal for City Council consideration to approve that project. And Luann's going to get into the details and presentation about the exciting, this really exciting program we got going on.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Luann Santangelo, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Get as close to the microphone as you can. Or it to you. Thank you.
Need a booster seat. Today, I'll be presenting you with the project to expand Indian Trails Sports Complex with 2 additional fields, growing that facility from 8 to 10. As we talked about before, the Prosperity 2021, our economic development plan, I think that's too loud. Really, this project fits well within that plan as far as expansion and bringing in tourists and visitors to our community and supporting our local small businesses. Last week at our meeting, our BAC presentation, one of the comments that was made was that that we have created an environment to help our local businesses grow and prosper, and this project really fits well within that, supporting all those local businesses within our community. Just a little history of the project, of what we've done up there before. In June of 2011, we expanded Indian Trail Sports Complex. That included the Indian Trails Middle School property. There is a connection that was already in place there, a walk bridge that connected those 2 sites, allowing for shared usage of those locations. At that time, we constructed 4 premier multi-purpose fields. That work was constructed by our Public Works Department under the leadership of Tony Capella. They invested over 4,800 man-hours in that project, completed it within 3 months, and that site was ready for play in September of 2011. Our partners with that, and have been since the beginning, has been our Palm Coast and Flagler Beaches, the TDC, Tourist Development Council, the Flagler County School District, and our local sports clubs and organizations who bring in these events to our community, PDA Soccer, Team Florida Lacrosse, and many others, including some adult organizations that have found Palm Coast and now host their events here. And just to remind everybody,
Palm Coast. The city's played a large role as far as being able to increase the amount of fields that we have so that we can bring these bigger tournaments, soccer, lacrosse tournaments here to Flagler County. When our city manager told us that they were going to do that, the impact of the amount of teams from even just from last year to this year has increased, I'd say, overall about 30 to 40% of our business and giving us times of the year when it's generally slower for the hotel, which keeps our employees working. For example, we're in July and we have a large check-in for this weekend, selling out the hotels in the whole area due to the fact that we've attracted these teams because of our increased fields and the care that they've taken to make those fields attractive and the costs attractive for these groups to come.
Just under 100 teams coming into the area from all over, South Carolina, Georgia, Miami, Tampa, all over, Tallahassee. So it generates a lot of money in hotel revenue and restaurants and delis and coffee shops. I just think it's tremendous for the Palm Coast area.
You see these venues come into town, you see the crowd, you see our numbers do jump. We're in the Home Depot shopping center, so you have the Hooligans, you have Outback, you have the Days Inn, and we see that getting crowded. People walk over from the Days Inn to get ice cream. It's important to see these things come into town. I think it is, because it does help the whole economy of Palm Coast.
We're really happy with what the city's done to increase the facilities to bring more teams in, adding fields or just maintenance at the fields to make everything better for these huge tournaments to bring more people. We've definitely seen over the past year or so an increase in business when these events come to the Indian Trails, whether it be soccer or lacrosse. And we've seen a nice increase in business on the weekends, the Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. A nice increase of 10 to 15% in sales based on these people coming in from all over the state. Especially see it when what we would call slow season, the March, April, May, when the snowbirds head back up north. It's nice to have a couple of the soccer tournaments and the lacrosse tournament on Father's Day that filled in the weekend sales there. And then we get a really nice fill-ins over in October for the lacrosse tournament, and it's really been helping us out a lot.
And so what have we been doing up there? Fiscal year 12, we had 10 tournaments, and this was right after we completed the initial expansion up there to the middle school. We estimate very conservatively visitor spending at $2.7 million. In fiscal year 13, we had 14 tournaments, and estimate that visitor spending at 3.1. And so far with this fiscal year, we have 24 tournaments currently scheduled at Indian Trails. We see our visitor spending increasing and really getting more diverse events, regional, national, and even international. And just this past week, between our meeting last week and this week, had 2 other organizations contact me for use of Indian Trails for soccer events that they want to host up there. And I think a big part of that is the way our fields look. We had the Genova International School Soccer that reached out to us about a month and a half ago. They found us by word of mouth. They heard about our location here, our facilities. They came out and actually scouted locations throughout Florida and selected us as one of 4 locations that they're hosting their school this summer. So, and it really gets back to our employees and our staff who really work hard to keep these fields in premier condition, and the word is getting out. So this project, we're looking at expanding over at the Indian Trails Middle School site again, adding 2 additional fields that will include irrigation system and drainage. We're looking at improving our current fields, installing improved drainage to help reduce the maintenance and allow for increased usage. The project, again, construction will be performed by our Public Works Department, tentatively starting in middle of June, with play to begin in October, and project budget for materials and contingency is right at $200,000. And I guess Chris isn't going to come up and help me. As you see, it is in our capital improvement program. There he is.
Yes, so this is our preliminary 5-year CIP, starting with fiscal year 14 that we're in currently. There's a budget of $200,000 for the additional 2 fields, Indian Trails Middle School Sports Complex. And we're anticipating a $150,000 grant, which we've recently applied for from the TDC, net effect of about $50,000 to this particular fund. And this is the Recreation Impact Fee Fund.
And just to show the location of the 2 additional fields, behind the middle school, the track field, and there's a large area there that we'll be able to construct 2 additional full-size soccer fields, multi-purpose fields. And our next steps is to amend our cone MOU with the school district, Memorandum of Understanding, to add the 2 additional fields. We have submitted the grant application to our Tourist Development Council for their consideration, and for tonight, asking for authorization for purchase of the materials. And that concludes my presentation.
Council questions?
Luann, how much are you asking from the TDC?
The maximum for the grant, which is $150,000.
Other questions?
What has been our track record with TDC?
I'm sorry?
What has been our track record with TDC?
Track record with TDC, we applied for one previous grant, and we received that grant in 2011.
And that was for the expansion of the first 4 fields. So
Right.
this is really a continuation of that project.
So we'll get an answer on that in the next 3 to 6 months, or how? When do we think we'll get an answer to that?
Before the end of May.
Oh, quick. End of May. That's 3 weeks.
Yeah, coming
And
up.
my understanding is the TDC requires data to support the contention that this money will in fact improve tourism, and we had overwhelming data to demonstrate that. So I think we'll have that same kind of data here. Other council questions?
Is the work that we're going to ask the Public Works people to do, and they're also working on a multi-purpose trail down in Seminole Woods, are we going to have to add any people to the payroll?
No, this is actually part of their schedule for this summer, both of those projects. In fact, we're doing the path in phases, and we'll finish the next phase of the path, and then once the funding's been approved, move on to this one, and then back to the path. That's the schedule.
Okay, so it's not the case that you've got people sitting on a bench somewhere waiting to be called with their shovels down to the Indian Trail Sports Complex.
Now, I can assure you this crew of ours is very popular right now. It has a number of projects that we all rely on, and it saves us a lot of money. So as Tony always says, I need a budget, I need a schedule, and I need plans, and we'll go get it done. And he has all that for these projects.
Other council questions? Open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 9? Come up to the podium, give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Louis McCarthy. I like the idea. It's just one thing, parking. You have moved away from existing parking, and when you get people like me with bad knees, how you gonna move them from point A to point B to point C? And that's the key thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. First issue is, I was reading in the paper where Daytona Beach is going to lose their tennis tournament. I was just wondering, are we doing anything, to maybe induce them to come over here? Maybe help pay off the debt we incur every year. Second is, who maintains these soccer fields and these other fields, and where does the money come from?
We'll get you to answer both those questions.
I'm Norman Weisskopf. Thank you for listening to me. This is a very nice project, but I think it should be put on the back burner because there's so many other projects here in Palm Coast that have to be done, such as the dog park, which just sits there all the time, and nobody does anything about it. I think the dog park should take preference over this field here. And it should start right away. I don't know why it's taking so long to get this dog park in, up to snuff. It just, people still come there, but it still looks like a pig pen. And people do come to the dog park from Milwaukee, and they come from Canada, and you talk about revenue coming in. If those people from other areas told their friends how great the dog park would be, they'd be coming here too. So I think there's other priorities. There should be sidewalks that are taken care of before something like this is done. And what was the other thing I'm thinking of? Street lamps. It's pitch dark on my street where I live, and you can't see anything, and it's dangerous, and it encourages crime. And I think those are the projects that should be done before any new projects get started here in Palm Coast. So that's why I'm here. That's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Vivian Lindy Olson. I think $200,000 is very little to pay for the big impact this has done on our businesses. But I would like to know, are you doing anything to promote Palm Coast so that those out-of-town visitors will buy and stay in Palm Coast?
We'll get you an answer to that question.
Good evening. I'm Gretchen Smith from the Flagler County Chamber, but I'm here as a mom. And I'm here as a mother of a 13-year-old lacrosse player, and we have to spend, I can't even tell you how much money traveling to away games. And I know a lot of other parents in Flagler County. I know Mr. Landon with his granddaughter. To be able to have the pride to have more fields here and more events here, and the kids saying, we've got a hometown advantage, I think that in itself speaks volumes. And so kudos for the expansion, and I hope that it goes through.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Carmine Pantuso, Palm Coast. I'd like to, the other gentleman was saying about parking. I've had my sons play there in soccer tournaments and other tournaments, and parking is tough there, especially when you have a tournament. So I think what you really need to look at good is if you approve these fields, is how much extra parking you may need there. Because again, if you have if any of you's driven by when they have the lacrosse tournaments, I mean, people are parked all over the place. I mean, they're parked on Belterre, they're parked on the sidewalks. I think that definitely should be a major concern. I mean, I'm for the fields, but I think along with the fields, you definitely need to set aside X amount of new parking spaces for the new fields. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
How you doing? My name is Carmichael McMillan. I actually record some of the tournaments there, and a lot of the parents complain about not having enough bathrooms. There's a long line at the bathrooms during tournaments. You really need to do something about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. So we don't approach the podium and close the public portion meeting. Come back to City Council. Yes, I saw the article about Daytona may lose its tennis tournament. Are we doing anything to try to attract that here?
I did not see the article. Luann, do you have an answer for it?
I haven't seen the article, but I know that working with our Tourist Development Council and our staff over at the tennis center, we are looking at other tournaments to bring to that location, youth tournaments, as well as maybe a potential adult tournament as well.
The problem, though, is the tennis tournament requires many more courts than what we have available. Maintenance. Once the fields are installed, who does the maintenance?
This is that joint use agreement we have with the school district. Our crews maintain it. They maintain both the Indian Trail Sports Complex owned by the city and these fields that we're building. The school district contributes some of the product of fertilizer, the bug killers, those type of things. They provide those and we apply them. So that's our agreement we have with the current fields on their property, and then proposal is to just expand that into these two new ones. So it's a good partnership. We all contribute. Just like during the day, during school year, these fields are the school district's fields, and then in the evening and on weekends when we have tournaments, they become part of the community's fields.
The issue of priorities. Perhaps you can give us an update on the Holland Park renovation, of which the dog park is a portion.
Right. You know, I know these things take a long time. That's more than just a dog park. I mean, that is making improvements to the drainage, to the street and the parking, and a variety of other things. That's under design. It is funded this year, at least the first phase. A lot of this, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Our finance director talked about funding and fund accounting that we have. If we did not do this, because the funding is primarily the grant from TDC, which has to be used for something that will encourage tourism. And although we might get a few dog visitors, nothing like we get when we have 130 teams, 25 players per team. That's what they're looking at, is filling up the hotels and the restaurants. And the interesting thing is how do you pay for things like the improvements to Holland Park and the paths? Well, it's those visitors that come and spend money in sales tax. And so this actually helps fund those projects that people would like to see in their neighborhoods. And if you did not do this, you don't have funds for the park, because we're using impact fee funds for local dollar, our own city dollars, which is $50,000. And impact has to be to expand. It can't be to just renovate. And because we have a dog park, we couldn't use it. So that's part of the fund accounting. This is not slowing down Holland Park. Two separate projects. That one is being engineered, designed, and that will primarily be done by a construction crew. It's that large of a project.
But this, assuming we get the TDC grant, this is funded. You could not use the TDC grant for the Holland Park, but that Holland Park expansion is already funded.
Yes.
So even if this were $200,000 that was made available, it would not.
It would not go towards Holland Park. It would not expedite it. It's separate funds that have to be used for those that are restricted, as our finance director tried to explain earlier.
A question I know that you're going to like to respond to. Once we get these people coming here to our tournaments, what do we do to promote Palm Coast?
Yeah, I mean, that's that video you saw was part of that. We actually have Find Your Florida, our marketing and communications division out of city manager's office is hard at work in promoting the brand, and we've been very successful. But primarily, we're finding it's word of mouth. They may complain about the restrooms, but they sure love the fields. They sure love how close we are to Flagler Beach, and you can go to the beach right after this. And what we find is a lot of these are word of mouth, and they keep coming back because of that. But I will also tell you, they may complain about the number of restrooms, but they sure like the fact we have a crew out there that keeps them clean, et cetera. And we actually have plenty. They just don't want to use the porta potties that we provide, as no one likes the porta potties. So.
But there's another aspect to that too, Your Honor. The Tourist Development Council and the Chamber of Commerce are planning to have what we call a concierge vehicle, so that when people come to events like this, that there is something there that says, hey, here are places that you could go visit, here are parks, here are restaurants, here is shopping. This is a concierge program that's been talked about for a while, and I think it will become a reality in a relatively near future.
And I know TDC does put brochures in the hotel. So when you get these hundreds of teams coming in and they pack our hotels, they get a brochure talking about the amenities that Flagler County and Palm Coast has to offer. So we clearly try to work on this.
I'm not sure the gentleman understood the progress that to be made in Holland Park towards the improvements and renovations, including relocating the dog park, because we last had this topic at the last council meeting, and I believe you quoted as saying when the date when construction was going to start. Maybe he hadn't heard that. Or
I don't recall the date, but it is this year. It's this summer we're planning on starting.
I think July was what?
July, yep, this summer.
Which is 2 months from now.
And then you alluded to it, the issue of parking and restrooms.
Well, I think I've already addressed the restrooms. I mean, to build restrooms out here would be extremely expensive, and we do provide porta potties for the large ones. As far as parking goes, the Indian Trail Sports Complex itself, in other words, the city portion of this is really where the parking problem is, and that's where most people come in, and the parking does get filled up very quickly. To address that, we have actually agreements with our neighbors to both sides. The church to the south,
Parkview Baptist.
Parkview Baptist Church, we have an agreement with them that those can be used as overflow parking. And then, of course, the school, we have an agreement with them that they can use overflow parking. And the fields, as you're seeing in this slide, is actually up towards the north, which you have one field here inside the track and then a parking lot here, which every time I've been out there is never full. So actually this helps a little bit with the parking and the fact that it spreads it out and it's not in the actual proper main portion of Indian Trail Sports Complex.
But to Mr. McCarthy's point, we have 2 golf carts now for people with bad knees and things, and we talked about adding a 3rd at the workshop.
Yeah, yes, and I was going to point that out, is that we do have, and that's part of the service, and that's one of the reasons they come back, is we do have a way of getting people that have mobility issues to the fields, out at the all the tournaments. All they have to do is coordinate with us, and we can get them there with the golf carts. And you know, it's I always kind of enjoy this as one of those good problems. Having an empty parking lot is not necessarily what your desirable situation is. I jokingly asked Little League representative, okay, what ball field do you want me to turn into a parking lot? And they said, of course, the soccer field, not the baseball field. And I'm sure it's vice versa. The best thing we can do is try to spread the parking out as best we can. We also are talking about additional signage to let people know where the overflow parking is. We know that parking is a problem, and we're working on trying to help solve that. It won't ever be totally solved because people want to park close and they don't want to walk. But it's just not a, I mean, there's no room there to add additional parking is the biggest problem.
Thank you. I think that deals with the question. Additional council questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 10, a resolution approving a contract with VOA Associates for design and construction management administration of the Community Center renovation and expansion project. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is another one of those projects that we identified a number of years ago as part of Prosperity 2021. The main focus here is when we were growing so fast, City Council set priorities that we were not just going to build new facilities and worry about the new growth areas, that we were also going to take care of some of our older neighborhoods and our older facilities. And obviously this facility fits in that last category. It's one of the oldest public facilities, if not the oldest public facility we have here in Palm Coast. So this year in our capital improvement fund, we do have dollars in there for the expansion and renovation of this property and facility. And Luann is going to give a presentation on the proposal along with some details regarding construction, because we're talking construction management firm also. And then Chris helps always with the dollars in the budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Lou Ann Santangelo, Director of Parks and Recreation. Last December, we presented you with the master concept plan for the community center. And shortly after that presentation, we moved forward with requests for qualifications for construction management and design services for the community center. We're here today to present those contracts for your consideration, but before we get into that discussion, I just wanted to quickly remind everybody of where we were, where we are, and where we're heading, what action steps we have, and what our next steps might be. We discussed during that meeting that City Council had established a vision for Palm Coast to be a premier city in Florida. With that vision, several plans resulted, including our Prosperity 2021, our Strategic Action Plan, and our brand message. These documents, along with our Parkway East Master Plan, reaffirm City Council's emphasis on the quality of life for our citizens and the desire to preserve our original neighborhoods of Palm Coast, of which our community center is a part. And as you can see from the pictures, on the left is one of the original pictures taken of our community center, and on the right is one of our most recent ones. And as our city manager said, our community center is one of the oldest public facilities we have in Palm Coast, built sometime between 1975 and 1977. In 1999, the building was transferred over to the city once we incorporated. And as you can see, the major difference between the two pictures is the trees in the front and the landscaping that has grown. And that's really about the only change. But Palm Coast, while the building hasn't changed much, Palm Coast certainly has. And we have continually growing population. We have rejuvenation and renovation of some of our older shopping centers. And we really have a citizen base who is an active citizen base and actively pursuing recreation, including what we offer here at our community center. And once we get them here, they come back again and again for the programs that we have available. And as you can see, we are truly an intergenerational, multi-generational facility offering programs and opportunities from toddlers through adults and seniors. And people come here and they become engaged with our community and engage with each other and really fulfill that need for social interaction within the community and what they desire to have. And just a reminder of the many, many groups here in our community that use our facility. And these are rentals that we have, reservations. What you don't see here are the many, many residents who reserve our rooms here, this room and our back room, for their private functions, whether it's a birthday party, baptism party, showers, you name it. We probably have hosted it here in the community center. And as you can see, over the last 3 years, our reservations have increased significantly from 459 in fiscal year 12 to 509 in fiscal year 13. And currently, we have 407 reservations and anticipate possibly doubling that number in this fiscal year. And what you don't see on this slide are the reservations that we've had to turn away because we were already booked on the preferred date of that individual. Since October, the end of October, we've had 39 requests for use of this facility on dates that were already reserved, and of those 39, only 5 were able to really reschedule their date. The others went to another location, another venue. And our current issues, just to recap, we had a 5-year evaluation for ADA compliance, and of course the deficiencies were highlighted within that document regarding our restrooms, kitchen, water fountains, and sinks, which is a major concern here at the community center. The functionality of the building, just inadequate storage, limited space, which really limits what we are able to do here as far as providing recreational opportunities to the community, and increasing participation numbers, such as summer camp. We're limited to the number of kids that we can actually take in camp because of the space. Parking becomes a concern, as always, lacks identity and really doesn't meet the community expectations, and what we really provide for the residents of our community just doesn't compare to our other parks and facilities, and doesn't meet the demand, again highlighting those reservations that we have turned away and continue to turn away. And then maintenance, just a continual issues with roof leaks in this room and throughout the building, the air conditioning and the sewer backups in the restrooms, which is always fun to find on a Monday morning. And where we're heading, of course, you know, with the expansion and the renovation, we would look to meet ADA regulations and really provide a facility that people of all abilities will be able to utilize fully, to continue to serve as that recreation and social focal point of our community. With our close proximity to I-95, we really do become a visitor center. You will often see during the daytime, if you happen to come by, people that come here with their bikes or, you know, without, who park here to utilize the trail system because they could catch linear trail right across the street from us, and from there get really to any of the other trails within the community. And so we become that visitor center because afterwards they'll come into our facility to cool off, use the restrooms, get a drink of water, and grab some information, and we try to load them up as much as we can with everything we have to offer. We are that trailhead for Linear Park and our trail network, increase programs, and accommodate resident requests for a larger venue for parties. This room right now, the seating capacity with tables and chairs is about 125. We often get requests for larger parties that we're just not able to accommodate here at this location. And then to provide that historical society display area, that becomes important to our residents as we age and grow as a community. So where were we? In August, we engaged VOA and Associates and Littlejohn Engineering, and they created that community center concept plan, which was presented to you in December of 2013. And again, we proceeded from that time, at that time, with the request for qualifications for design services and construction management, and then we proceeded with the development of a letter of intent. And just to remind everybody of the concept plan and some of the pictures and the potential of this location and this site, the outdoor amenities, not a pool. Not a pool. And then the outdoor site plan with the renovation of the play area and the park area and the trailhead, the outdoor trailhead and the restrooms. Because remember, when we close this building and people are here enjoying this facility in the outdoor park, once we close the building, they have no access with their children for restrooms. And then just the interior site plan showing how the space can be expanded. So this current fiscal year, $430,000 was allocated for the design services. During that design, we would make sure that the design allowed for a phased construction, and with construction to occur depending upon funding availability, and the construction phase would then be funded through our 5-year CIP.
This is our preliminary capital projects fund 5-year CIP, with fiscal year 14 being in the first column. The very top line item that's highlighted, ad valorem taxes, there are no property taxes currently or this year or right now anticipated to be put into this fund for any of these construction amounts. It's primarily funded by the second line item, which is the small county surtax, which is the 0.5% sales tax collected within the county. The second circled in red item is some recreation impact fees that would be transferred into this fund to help fund the expansion of the community center, which is something the impact fees can be utilized for. Down towards the bottom, about 2/3 of the way, 3/4 of the way down, is the actual project budget. Again, $430,000 initially this year for the design phase, and then we phase construction out over a number of years, depending on how those construction plans come in. And then the bottom line really just lets us know that based on our projections, we're never going into the negative. Again, our revenue projections are fairly conservative. The idea here is when we look out into the future, we want to make sure that we're living within our means and the available revenue sources for these projects.
And next, we'll go through our action items, which will include the contract for architectural design, contract for construction management, and the letter of intent.
And the first action item is the architectural services contract. We publicly advertised the project. We followed the state CCNA process for selecting a consultant. We received 7 qualification packages. An evaluation team was put together. They were reviewed and ranked and scored, and VOA Associates was the top-ranked firm. The city staff then negotiated a scope and fee for services with them. The fee is broken down into 2 phases. The design phase, which is currently funded for this year at $384,000, and the construction phase at $164,000 roughly. The construction phase includes several subcategories: a LEED certification, construction administration, and an allowance for that visitor center exhibit area display that would be worked through as part of the design construction portion of the project. The second item for approval is the construction management contract at risk. Again, this followed the same process. It was publicly advertised following the state CCNA process. The city received 6 qualification packages for this item. An evaluation team again reviewed all those packages, scored them, ranked them. Ajax Building Corporation was the top-ranked firm. City staff again negotiated a scope and fee for services with that firm. And this is broken down into a pre-construction phase services. Those are the services that will be completed during the design phase. They will assist in evaluating and working through the design, presenting the cost estimates and phasing to move forward. That is a lump sum fee for that portion of work at $43,285. And during the end of the design phase, a guaranteed maximum price for construction will be established, and whether that's phase 1 or what portion of work will be determined at that time. And they have a fee of 5% for that phase of the project.
And we've also been working with the Palm Coast Bridge Club with the letter of intent as a lessee of this space once it would be expanded. The lease term would not exceed 30 years. Maximum of 36 hours per week, and the monthly rate would be calculated depending on the hours per week, the standard rate, hourly rate with the volume discount, the lease term, and the prepayment amount. The monthly fee would increase 2% annually on October 1 of each year, and the rest of the general lease terms are outlined within the document. The formal lease we would look at the start of Phase 1 construction. And just to show how the rent analysis would work, if you change any of the And if you change, well, Chris can explain it a lot better than me.
I can only if I can see it, so bear with me 1 second. Okay. It's basically an interactive sheet that we've created to allow for changes in any of the lease terms in terms of hours per day, days per week, potential upfront prepaid rent that we've been talking about, the lease term, rates of return, any of the particular changes in any of these variables boil down to what the monthly rent would be. So for instance, if the upfront payment would change, I'll just make a quick change here for illustrative purposes. Did I hit the return key? Sorry. There we go. The bottom line changes, the amount per month increases from where it was considerably less than that up to $13.75 a month. All this is tied in to give us a tool to use in negotiating with any public-private partners that are willing to participate in the community center renovation project.
Chris, how many hours is this daily rate predicated on?
In this particular case, it's 6 days a week, 6 hours a day.
Okay.
Luann?
Yes.
During the workshop, we talked about the number of participants in this bridge club and the number of people per day that are expected. Maybe it'd be helpful to review that again.
And I think their numbers range anywhere from 60 to possibly 100 per day. About 60 to 100. And different individuals per day. Not everybody plays all 5 days.
And there's 270 some members.
Yeah, close to 300 members of their organization, and they, like I said, they average between 60 and 100 per day that will come in to play bridge.
And they also part of the tournament, so they've assured us that with this type of facility, they're going to encourage people to come here for tournaments instead of us always traveling somewhere else for tournaments.
Right.
So it's another one of those where anytime we can get those visitors here to participate in a sport, that's a good thing.
Right. And our next steps. Before you tonight is the for your consideration, the design and construction management contracts, as well as the letter of intent with the Bridge Club. Upon approval, we would bring back a preliminary design, layout, and elevations in August, September of this year. And then in early 2015, again for City Council consideration, establish guarantee minimum price for Phase 1 and rental and lease agreements with any private partners that we should have. And that concludes my presentation.
I think it'd be wise to talk about the need for the facility without encumbering the bonus, if you will, of the Bridge Club. I mean, for fear that people might draw the conclusion that the reason that we're doing this is because we have a tenant, so to speak. Because 60 people coming 36 hours is a lot of traffic.
Right.
I mean, a lot of cars and a lot of people coming and so on.
Right.
A lot of. So.
And Mr. Ferguson, just to follow up on that, none of our budgets include any reliance on any of these public-private partnerships to fund the project.
I think that's important to note because some people may get the impression, I know casual observers draw their own conclusions regardless of the facts sometimes, but in this case, it'd be wise to reiterate that type of comment for fear that people would draw the wrong conclusion.
Well, if I could add to that, I mean, this facility here, we rent it out virtually every day. So when we expand, we will be doing the same thing. It will also have the additional larger space for when the Bridge Club is not using the space. It will be available on Sundays and nights and those type of things for weddings, and we'll rent it out to other groups. The Bridge Club agreement is really like a pre-lease. I mean, the private sector does pre-leases all the time. Before they build, they always look at a pre-lease, and that's really all we're talking about here. And we are not counting on it, as Mr. Ferguson and Chris indicated, that But we know we will get rental fees, not just from the Bridge Club, but other groups. The other thing critical of this isn't just about the expansion for that one room, but this room will be renovated, the restrooms which don't meet ADA. There is a lot of renovations that will happen to this existing portion of the building. That is also very critical, just to meet the federal law on accessibility, and then just upgrade to POMCO standards versus a substandard we have today.
Council questions? So now we'll open the meeting to the public. The presentation that you heard was agenda items 10, 11, and 12. Feel free to comment on any of the three, but council will vote on them as three separate items. Anyone wish to be heard on any of these agenda items?
Good evening again. I'm Norman Weisskopf, same name as before. This is a fine project. I have no problem with it, but it should be on the back burner. The dog park comes first. I think that's the most important thing now, and construction on that dog park should start right away. There's no reason why all these other projects take precedence over the dog park, which has been there for years. In the worst condition you can possibly have a dog park. It's probably the worst one in the whole country. I think you should put your efforts into cleaning up that dog park and making it look respectable. 80% of the homes here people have dogs in 80% of the homes here, and they want to use the dog park. But yet they don't use it because it's a filthy pig pen, is the best way I can explain it. So why isn't the dog park taking precedence over all these other projects? I don't quite understand that. The other thing is we need street lamps on our streets. It's too dark on our streets. That should be take precedence over these type of things. And we need sidewalks on our streets also. Every time I walk my dog on my street, I'm almost clipped by a car. It happens every day. So we need this. This is not a problem, but there's priorities, and we need other things that come before this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jack Cowell, Palm Coast. When you start the renovations, are you going to close this whole place down, or are you going to do it so you can leave something open and then work on something else? You know, if you close it all down, then we're losing revenue. And, you know, we can't lose revenue. Very important.
Excellent question. We'll get an answer. Next speaker.
Good evening, Janet McDonald. You had a wonderful picture up there of the expansion. Could you go through that for people who may not have heard the workshop presentation? And yeah, that's the one. It looks to me like all of our guaranteed overflow parking on the lawn area is gone. And could you explain how it's accommodated by this drawing, and how many, I guess I'd like to know the concentration of uses in each of the expanded areas, and if the parking will accommodate that with all of this facility being used all at the time. And the pond is just a coin toss pond, or is it just a water element? Okay. Thank you.
We'll get answers for that for you. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the public podium, we'll close down the public portion meeting, come back to City Council. Mr. Carroll's questions, very good. When we're renovating this room, where's City Council going to meet? How are we going to handle the renovation with the current demand?
Well, I wish I had an answer for you right now, because I can tell you that's kind of $1 million question that we have, and that's something the construction management company and the design team is going to have to work out. Ideally, we would do the expansion and therefore have that room available while we renovate some of the old. But that is, it's too early, and we need a design team and construction management to answer that. We have...
We need the design team to know that that is an issue for us.
Yes, that's what we're saying, and we have people that this is their workspace that needs to continue, et cetera. It's like remodeling your home, though. There's times when you have to go on a trip for a weekend while they tear up the kitchen and you can't use it that weekend or something. We're going to have to work that out. Definitely a major issue for us.
Okay, and now, Luann, the second question had to do with parking, density, so on and so forth.
Right. Some of the parking on the front will go away, but we've expanded the parking area back where it says gate and to that grass area. That's all additional parking back there. The grass areas are also overflow parking that you see in the middle and along the side. And then there's always a potential when we've had larger events, we will also work with some of our neighbors on weekends, especially across the street at Florida Hospital, their parking lot, and we get a use agreement with them to use their parking spaces for overflow, as well as across the street at the Mediquick area in those lots as well. And we also suggest that for other groups that may be hosting events here, when we know we have multiple events, we'll seek out those use agreements for those locations if we would need it. And that's only happened once or twice.
So if we were to count up the existing number of impervious parking spaces, you're going to expand that number, transfer the overflow lawn parking from the Palm Coast Parkway side to the area more grass parking at the rear.
Right down here, yep.
Right. And we currently have 64 spaces in our lot, so there's not a lot of spaces out there right now, but that will expand it significantly and account for those lost spaces in the front.
If I could also address the pond, it is actually a stormwater feature. It's a required pond because we are increasing the pervious surface. Therefore, we have to have an additional retention pond. You'll see there's another one down at the opposite corner. This is currently a ditch, and that ditch will be filled in, piped, and used for the park area, but we still have to have some detention stormwater feature on the property, so we have two of them. And that's, once again, this is conceptual. What you see will definitely change. It always does when they get into final design, and this is a good start, but it's not the final design. If we could talk about the dollars, Mayor, if that was a question about the priority. Sure. Chris, if we can go back to, I just would like to show the resident that this is ahead of, or excuse me, this is behind the Holland Park renovation. In 2014, we actually have, and it's in this same fund, $1.6 million in construction. We only have, for this project, design dollars. So construction will start on Holland Park, all of the dog park this summer, and we have funding for that. It will carry on into next fiscal year, and that's where we actually have the $2,700,000 to carry on beyond October 1 of this year. So the question as far as which one's ahead, we're just starting design on this project while we're going to be under construction of Holland Park. So Holland Park is obviously a lot further ahead because we're in final stages of design of it right now. And if I could address the streetlight, our streetlight policy is in your neighborhood. If there is an intersection of two streets that does not have a streetlight, all you have to do is let us know, and we will make it happen through FP&L. They actually install but every time we put a street light up, then they charge us the monthly fee for those street lights. But we do grant every request for a street light at an intersection in the community. The other thing that I always like to point out is that FP&L does have a security lighting program if you want additional lighting, and that they will, if there's a pole in your front yard, which we usually have most of them because they put it in between every other house, they will actually put a light up that points towards the house, not towards the street, and then there's I believe it's about a $10 flat fee that they charge an electric bill every month. So that's the other thing you can do if you're concerned in the neighborhood. Both of those are part of our lighting program. Thought I'd highlight that because you kept asking about it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, we're back to City Council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion on agenda item number 10?
Mr. Mayor. Luann, can you put the conceptual plan back up there? Essentially, and again, this is conceptual, but essentially we've moved the overflow lawn parking internal and added an egress, so it's a safer plan than having people try to back up out onto Palm Coast Parkway when we have those really heavy use evenings.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Right now, it's at the lower end. I'm not good with direction, so on this side, it's right there.
South. Away from Palm Coast Park.
Yes. There is a new entrance exit that will go right onto Clubhouse, where you'll be able to go either left or right and allow for more stacking on Clubhouse before you get to the red light.
Right, which again, in our current configuration, it's difficult to get out, sometimes dangerous because it's hard to see around the corner if there's a stack of cars coming and someone makes a left to go south.
Correct.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Additional council questions, comments, or a motion?
Move approval of agenda item number 10. Thank you.
A second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries without objection. Agenda item number 11, you've already had the presentation. This is the next step. This is the approval of a pre-construction management services.
Move to approve.
We're going to open to the public, though, just in case. Anyone in the public wish to speak separately on agenda item number 11? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Come back. Mr. McGuire?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 12, this is the last of the three components. I'm going to open the meeting to the public once again, in case anyone wants to speak separately on this one. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, go back to council.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve, moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the consent agenda item, which is items 13, 14, and 15. I'd like to offer the public an opportunity to speak on any one of these items. If you wish council to remove one or for further discussion, this is your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one approach the podium, motion on the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Move approval as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the public participation portion of the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to speak on any item of interest, whether it was any item not on the agenda, something you may have heard at the workshop, or anything else that moves you to want to speak. Approach the podium, give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Excuse me. My name is Bertram Hines from Seminole Woods Division. I am here to thank, well, let me say first, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Clerk, and all who have participated in the walkway that is being under construction right now. I'm here to say thanks. We spoke about it. was guaranteed it was going to be started. It started. The city workers did a fantastic job. I was skeptical about having it, what we call, in-house or whatnot, but believe me, everybody down in Seminole was saying, what a fantastic job. The guys work in the rain, in the sun. Good. I'm pleased. But there is a saying, 1,000 miles begin with the first step. That step has been taken. Let's try and continue all the way down to US 1. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That was Confucius that said that.
Was it? Next speaker. Next speaker.
Vincent Taylor, Seminole Woods, 26 years. Excuse me. Mr. Mayor, fellow council members, I've missed quite a few meetings because I am the caregiver of my sick wife. I'm here this evening on purely a congratulatory mode. Firstly, as a Seminole resident, I feel very proud seeing our park being used by residents and persons that aren't even residents. Very good. Next phase. Besides that, as I ride around Palm Coast, I noticed the beautification that's taking place in our city. It's phenomenal. For this, I would take the opportunity to congratulate our council members and all concerned. A special thanks to our district rep, Mr. Renzo. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Next speaker.
I'm Timothy Hall from Grand Haven. And in regard to the red light cameras, you cannot come onto my personal property and place a surveillance device without my consent or without a specifically limited warrant issued by a judge on a case-by-case basis. And the same applies to our public-private property, we the people's property, where it's the only argument that can be made against red light cameras, not about a money scam or rear-ending people or a made-up epidemic of red light camera runners. It's not the case. The argument is the constitutional argument, the Fourth Amendment. And just as you cannot come on my property and put that surveillance device, smart meters as well, you need consent or a warrant. In the public realm, you're prosecuting future crimes. You can't make the leap. A police officer can't go to a judge and say, Judge, I think these people, everybody here is going to run a red light at some point. Therefore, I need a camera to surveil these guys 24 hours a day. You never get the cause. He has to see you run the light, gives himself cause, issues you a ticket, which is basically saying go before a judge, pay your ticket, or fight it. So a judge's hands are tied right from the minute that the officer can't go in and say, we think these people are going to run lights. Okay? It has to be on a case-by-case basis. I can't say, you're going to run a light at some point, so I need to watch you. The officer has to see you run the light to have cause to stop you and detain you and issue you a ticket. And there's no other argument to be made. You guys are all, if you supported it willingly, you're violating the Constitution and it's an illegal act. If you don't know any better, then you should educate yourself on the Constitution, because your jobs should be in peril right now. He, as an officer of the court, could viably, if we weren't so detached from the Constitution, he could arrest you all right now and go through a court process and run it to its end. So right now, in my opinion, he'd be in a dereliction of his duty for not doing it, because you can't detach from the Constitution. The minute you do, basically a law not based in the Constitution is not a law at all. It's tyranny. And that's the argument to be made, whether you make it to the governor or whoever. And it goes right to the top. It comes from the top right on down to you guys. So red light cameras, smart meters, you need consent or a specifically limited warrant issued by a judge. Judge can't give it to you based on the idea that maybe you're going to run a red light at some point. It has to be specifically limited to an individual that they saw do it. Okay? So you can't make that leap from there to the light. It never happens.
15 seconds, please.
Okay. And basically that's it. All the other arguments are out the door. It's the only legal argument you can make. And I thank you for your time. And
thank you, sir.
I just don't know what else to say.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Carmine Pantuso, Palm Coast. One of the most important jobs of the mayor and the city council is to look out for the safety and welfare of his residents. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the red light cameras. I wasn't going to come here for a few weeks, but after all the media misinformation, I'm here tonight to speak in favor of it and point to a few statistics that I was able to look up. The Florida Department of Highway and Safety and Motor Vehicles have done 2 studies on the red light cameras. Both studies pointed to the red light cameras decrease accidents and change drivers the way they drive. In fact, they pointed that only 5% of the people that get the red light tickets are repeat offenders. Now, the question is, do we have a problem here in Palm Coast with people running red lights? Well, from February 3rd to March 2nd, 2014, there were 1,189 citations issued to drivers for running red lights. I've been in Palm Coast now for 12 years, and I've seen a lot of people run red lights, and I would say 1,189 people running red lights in a month's time, that is a problem. And to me, it's a safety issue. These people are running red lights. They have no regard for pedestrians, no regard for fellow drivers. And in 2008, the Federal Highway Administration did a study. They found in 1 year that 762 deaths occurred because of people running red lights, and that over 165,000 people were injured because of people running red lights. So I'm here to say that the red lights is a tool to catch people who are breaking the law by red lights. Now, there is going to be a lot of opposition. Of course there is. There's a lot of loud voices saying we don't want the red light cameras. That's to be expected when you have over 1,000 people getting citations every month for running red lights. I would just like to close and say this, okay? By having red lights, if it changes the way that people drive, and if it saves one life, and it saves people from being injured and maimed or maybe paralyzed, it is well worth it. So I'm giving you guys all the credit in the world for putting in the red lights, which again I see as a tool to catch these people who are running the red lights, because prior to the red light cameras, very few citations were issued. So I'm here to say I support the red lights, and I hope that, oh, thank you. I hope that that you're not swayed by all the loud voices now saying that we don't want the red lights. I'm just here to say that a lot of people in Palm Coast support the red light cameras, and we want our city to be safer. Thank you very much.
Next speaker.
Jack Kyle, Palm Coast. The Daytona Council or Commission, whatever you're going to call them, they're doing a study on transporting people from Daytona to the rail, with the new rail that they built. I'm just wondering, is it possible that we could probably do the same thing? You know, people want to go to Orlando. Maybe we can have some kind of a shuttle. I mean, I'm just bringing it up, you know, because Daytona is going to do it. I don't see why we can't. It's only a 30-mile difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. I'm Alan Peterson, and I'd also like to speak about red light cameras, but my comments are going to fall somewhere in between the two speakers that you've already heard talking about cameras. There's been what I consider to be some distraction lately with a couple of the local judges making comments about the Palm Coast and the red light cameras. The first one is Judge Craig, who objected to some of the information that was on the citation document, and he also stated that he thought the process was unfair. Hopefully, the information that is now going to be put on the citation documents will be legally permissible, and any glitches there will be taken care of. As far as the fairness of the program goes, we all like to think that laws will in fact be fair, but there's no requirement. The law is the law, and hopefully no other individual will have a vehicle that they own who can go through a red light at 16 miles an hour and not get a citation and be required to pay for it. The other judge that has made some comments is Judge Moore Stens. And her comment was on as far as dismissing court appearances by the city. Now, either she wasn't aware of the procedures that were in effect, or the procedures have changed and the city wasn't aware of that. But it seems to me that's a simple matter of communications and can be easily taken care of. My concern primarily with the red light cameras is that when I was on city council and voted with Mayor Nats several years ago for the first 8 cameras, we had a 90-day study before the cameras were put in, and we had a 90-day report after that fact. And of the 8 cameras that went in, accidents went down in 7 of the locations and were unchanged in 1. Now the city's got cameras everywhere. But as I read the information that's periodically put in the Palm Coast Observer, some of those have lots of camera flashes or questions, but almost no citations. Less than maybe 5% of the potential infractions result in a citation. The controversy that happens time and time again is, are they there for safety purposes, or are they for revenue? They were originally set up for safety, clearly. Now there's a question as to whether they're a revenue producer, and there is justification in my mind for those who feel that it is, because most of the citation revenue goes out of the city and is obviously reduces what can be spent here. I would like to suggest that you look at the locations and take 25% of them and take the last 90 days for infractions, disconnect the camera, and then look 90 days later and see if you've got, if there have been any particular problems with the disconnect on the cameras. If not, okay. If not, then go another 25%. But try to get the public to agree that they are there for safety, not revenue.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carmichael McMillan. I'm the treasurer for the general elector. We're running the petition to get rid of the red light cameras. Our reasons for, first of all, let me say I appreciate the work that you guys do for us. I have great admiration for everybody on the council. Our intention wasn't to take the decision away from the city council, whether or not to have the cameras or not. We would like the public to vote on it. Actually, we would prefer you to remove these cameras before November. The reason we want the cameras gone is the $3.1 million in revenue we lose in economic money that leaves Palm Coast every year. That presentation earlier about the Indian Trails Park, she put it in that the park brought $3.2 million in revenue to Palm Coast. That was wiped out with the red light cameras. I believe that these cameras were put in for safety reasons, to stop people from barreling through the red lights. However, now, of those 1,100 citations, 85% are for the right-hand turn. Okay? The red light runner problem has abated, but the revenue leaving our economy is still going. The next issue with the cameras is our image. The city's image is being hurt. I know people in Flagler Beach who will not drive through Palm Coast. Okay, there are people who come visit our town. Okay, and we're trying to raise the visitors. Okay, the same people that come to the Indian Trail Sports Complex, they will not drive through Palm Coast. I hear them talking about it when I'm recording. When these visitors get home, they get a nice memento of their visit to Palm Coast in the effect of a $158 ticket in many occasions. It's hurting our image. You know, the BAC reported last week they produced $7+ million per year in the last 3 years of economic growth for our city. For every $2 they created, $1 left with the red light cameras. It's counterproductive. I think that if we get rid of these cameras now, before November, the $2 million that's going to be lost from our economy between now and November can be prevented. And so we're asking you to vote on these cameras, get rid of Ordinance 2006-4, traffic light safety, and get rid of these cameras. I'm all done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Vivian Linde Olsen. I want to say that if I drive in a city with cameras or in a city without camera, I respect the law. And if somebody's caught going through the red light, and it could be me, I would gladly pay the fee.
Next speaker.
Evening, gentlemen. Dennis McDonald. First thing I'd like to say is, I don't know if any of you are aware of it or not, but we have more red light cameras than New York City. So I just find that to be a little bit out of whack. Let's talk about safety. Carmine came up and spoke about safety, and I'd like to speak about it. And I think maybe the way we start is by the way the red light cameras started. First off, the idea that red light cameras, are a infraction, a code infraction by the city is wrong. We pay a sheriff's department $2.5 million per year. You guys just did a contract, right? And so this is the guy who gives me a speeding ticket. He gives me a ticket if I do anything else wrong under the UTC. And so I don't understand why this council didn't do their job and get our sheriff, and at the time it was a different sheriff than it is right now, to step up and make sure that he handled this issue. So now I stood here not quite 2 years ago in July, and Nestor Abreu sat right here and gave you a presentation. And we're talking about safety now with like Carmine was talking about. You check the minutes, 12-644, it was July 3rd of 2012 when you put in 37 more red light cameras. And I brought up the fact that the data that was up there on that board at that time showed an increase. I believe there were 8 cameras, and there were 2 of them that showed a definite increase in collisions at those intersections. I asked Nestor if he had an answer, and you'll find that he said no, and I didn't find any response from anybody else here at that time. Then we moved ahead, and Frank Meeker put the motion on the floor. Mr. Lewis seconded it, and then 2 more councilmen the mayor and Mr. McGuire went ahead and approved those 37 red light cameras. You know, I just think you took the wrong turn to start with. This is an issue that should have been handled by the Sheriff's Department, and you know, you pay them a lot of money. You've got a $2.5 million carrot that you could use, and so you know, I agree that if you want to be on the safety side, stop charging people this and make. How about we order the red lights in this city to go to an all-red cycle so that we can maybe eliminate for sure some of those accidents. And you know, there's no question about the fact that no matter where you go in this country, people run red lights and roll through the corners and have accidents and all the other things. This is not unique to Palm Coast. So if we're not gonna, we are sucking $2.8 million a year out of our economy, and that's another thing that hurts us, especially when we're dead last on in the employment specter. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Vincent Taylor, Palm Coast. This business of back and forth with the red light cameras, I think we should have a referendum. Besides that, if it hasn't happened yet, it will happen eventually, that criminals will be having a free pass through our city. Simply because if a police officer observes someone committing an infraction, a traffic infraction, we all know that sometimes when the officer approaches that driver, he may ask, "Could I check your trunk, sir?" Or he may smell alcohol in the driver's breath. And I think not being able to do that, criminals will just drive through Palm Coast and just ignore the red light because some guys carry contraband worth thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and $158 is nothing to pay. So with that, saying this, I think we should bring back personal stoppage by our peace officers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
I'm Norman Weiskopf again, and I think these cameras have been around for too long. We're not, those of us that are against these red light cameras are not people that like to run red light cameras or, you know, speed and do things that are illegal all the time. We're just regular people that are on the streets with our cars, and we're just driving. So I think this city should do like the other cities in Florida, like Melbourne, Florida, and St. Petersburg, Florida, and Oviedo, Florida. And there's more, I don't remember all of them, that have eliminated all these red light cameras and get rid of them already because they're just irritating everybody, whether they're legal or illegal or whatever. I'd rather have a police officer stop me if I had gone through a red light camera, or gone through a red light, I should say, or sped or whatever, and get a ticket. You know, I don't approve of red light cameras watching every move that I make. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next speaker.
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. You know, I'm listening to this, and the only reason I got up was somebody mentioned we need to have police do the job instead of the red light cameras. The reality is we can't afford it. You would have to put a police officer on every one of those hot spots, patrolling or being on foot patrol or whatever there. Do you realize, or do any of these people realize how much it would cost? The answer is yes, they do realize, because they'll turn around and they'll say, you're overspending. So they'll catch you on one end and catch you on another end. You're overspending, or you have too many of this. If you have too many police officers, what are all them police officers doing besides catching people with red lights? So while they're catching people with red lights, somebody is walking in my house and I'm popping a cap up their behind. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Doesn't need a policeman.
Bert from Hines. I happen to get a summons for going through a red light, apparently. I do not run any red lights. So I want to know, question, can I make a right turn on the red light when I look left, I look right, and it is clear? Can I do that? I think that's the only reason why I got this ticket. Then another thing, when I went to pay the ticket, they don't want a check. And if I present my credit card, I think I even got tax on that. So
hi, I'm Diana LeBrun, and I used to be that person that sat back and said, hey, if you don't want a red light violation, don't run a red light. But there's so much dissension about this subject. I think it's holding us back, and I'm actually kind of getting sick of hearing about the red light cameras. And I think the only way that we can solve this is to put it on the ballot, put it on the referendum. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Hi, Janet McDonald. I agree. I think it's a community decision. It's on community property. And I think it needs to be put out to the people. I think you've heard from the people. My real concern is that it takes an organization that may not have been grassroots to get this to the public forum, but it has generated some real deep fear paralysis coming out in everyone that I hear talking about signing the petition. They can't get the paper in their hands fast enough. Every time they come up to an intersection, they panic because they don't know if they're going to make it through or that the people behind them are going to try to get through, or they're paying attention. Certain people have said that they anticipated the person in front of them going through the yellow because it had just turned yellow as they approached the no man's land, the banner stripe in the highway, and yet that person, in fear of getting a ticket, slams on their brakes and they had to divert to another lane. So we're causing a lot of issues in just the lack of knowing that there's a common red light, so that they don't have to worry about either making it before the next line goes through. And I think the other thing that is a cause of concern around here is that we have those birthday lights, because we have so many individual lanes that get to go for a certain number of seconds that it almost seems like you get another birthday before you get your turn. And I think that's the other reason that we have this issue. So I think some of the reorganization is going to change that in the major things on Palm Coast Parkway. And yet, I think they're a hazard for the community. And the other thing I want to urge you not to keep them in place, should you change the contract with the traffic company, because on the Free for All Friday program, I heard Mr. Landon refer to the fact that certain people want to keep them just for surveillance. And I think when we have a brand that looks like that, when we say that we are the beaches and we're the place to come for recreation and we're the place where you want to really raise your family, and then we have these really ugly black poles all over town, that's not a beautification project. And with the possibility of being surveillance, it's a big brother society. Nobody wants to live in big brother society, especially down by the beach. We don't need it. What we need is human intelligence telling us when we've overstepped the bounds, not artificial intelligence. We actually got a citation in the mail of somebody else's car. We don't even own a Suburban, but we got a ticket for, thank you, for a Suburban with a license plate that's similar to one that my daughter has that was registered at one time. So, you know, the machines don't have the ability to do what an officer of the law would do, and we can afford them. And every officer we have is well worth their money. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Just briefly to add to what she said, we're a nation of laws and not men. And there's been people with 3 or 4 shots.
Excuse me. You already spoken on this topic?
Yes, sir. And I'm just adding to what she said. We're a nation of laws and not men. And if you do not have the referendum, you're wielding power you do not have.
Thank you.
Have a referendum. No fair.
Next speaker.
Ron DeCosta, Palm Coast. I've been driving for almost 80 years now, and I've been driving in Palm Coast for 11 years, and I have never found a difference in my driving or anyone else's driving since the red lights appeared. I do not dodge cities with red lights because I know I'm capable of driving within the law. And this right on red, if it was my way, if I had my way, I would say the hell with right on red. You just stop when the light is red and you proceed whether you're going right or straight after the light turns green. And that would solve a lot of problems. But the thing is, the right on red does not help the pedestrians. You've got people waiting to cross the road, and you've got these people that say they look right and left before they turn, but they're still moving, that haven't stopped to look both ways to make sure that somebody in a wheelchair or a bike or a pedestrian walking isn't waiting to get across the street. So it's not fair for them. And this fear of losing money and so forth is malarkey. Keep the red lights. Forget the referendum, because if you put it on a referendum, you're going to have more red light runners voting no, and there probably are more red light runners in Palm Coast than the ones that observe the law. So it would go down in defeat. So just keep it the way it is. Do what you're doing it right, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. So you know to approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Come back to council. I'm going to comment on the right on red first, because the circumstances have made that confusing for drivers. Florida law says that you must come to a full and complete stop. You may proceed to make a right turn on a red if it is safe. That's what the law says. When the red light cameras were first instituted, it was decided by the state that there should be not a prohibition, an absolute prohibition, but that if you slowed to a reasonable and prudent speed, which was left undefined by the state, you could proceed through a red light without coming to a full and complete stop. The city of Palm Coast determined that reasonable and prudent was 12 miles an hour. So if you slowed to 12 miles an hour or less and proceeded through a red light, you would not receive a citation. If you were going faster than 12 miles an hour, you would. When the state of Florida revised their statutes 2 years ago, and when they took the lion's share of the dollars for themselves without providing any service to local municipalities, they reversed that decision and went back to, you have to come to a full and complete stop. Part of the problem for drivers in Palm Coast and other areas was that we educated them that 12 was okay, 11 was okay, and now all of a sudden the state says it's not. So the issue of right turn on red is an ongoing issue, and it's one that's going to require education. We know what happens. You approach a red light, you look to the left, and you proceed to turn, and you don't look to the right, and we have incidents after incidents after incidents of pedestrians and cyclists who come out the loser of that confrontation. There's a 77-year-old lady in the hospital right now as a result of an improper right turn on red. Now, having listened to all the comments, there's one question. The very first speaker talked about this as a constitutional issue. Yes. Mr. Reichman, I know Mr. McGuire assumes you to be a constitutional expert. I suspect you're not.
He knew Marbury versus Madison.
That's something. Would you care to comment on the constitutionality? Ultimately, the determination of whether something is constitutional or not resides with the Supreme Court of the United States. But you would care to comment on that?
Well, I can tell you that the speaker was raising the Constitution, or the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, and clearly there are rights afforded to all citizens in the United States by that Fourth Amendment. I think it's important to understand that there is a significant distinction that the United States Supreme Court and all the other federal and state courts in the United States have made between expectations of privacy and rights to privacy on their own private property versus on public property. And that's important because remember now that what we're talking about is not something that Palm Coast has adopted. This is something that the Palm Coast has done, like many other jurisdictions, local governments in the state of Florida, pursuant to Florida statutes that you're referring to, Mr. Mayor, and that's the Mark Wendell Act, which was passed in 2010. And that I can assure you, our office reviews decisions on a weekly, monthly basis where individuals who have received citations, uniform traffic citations, as a result of running a red light and being captured by these red light cameras, challenge those citations, make arguments to local courts on the grounds that the Mark Wendell Act is unconstitutional. In each and every case, the courts that review these decisions uphold the constitutionality of the Mark Wendell Act. If there is a legal challenge that ultimately succeeds before the Florida Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, that finds that the regulations that the Florida legislature has passed, the Mark Wendell Act and red light cameras, is unconstitutional, then every local government in the state of Florida that has red light cameras will stop using red light cameras. And that will include the city of Palm Coast. But at this time, the Florida courts, and there is no court that has held that this is unconstitutional. And if there is a court that rules that, I will be reporting that to you immediately.
Now, all of the other speakers raised a variety of issues. Does this increase the number of rear-end collisions? Does this prevent intersection collisions? Are the number of citations going up? These are all statistical questions. And I don't know, Mr. Landon, if you're prepared to provide statistics tonight, but I think what I'd like to see is some statistics to the extent that we know whether violations have increased or decreased at these intersections. If there has been a significant decrease, one would assume that that represents a change in driver behavior. I raised this issue a year ago, and I said, well, maybe the fewer citations is because there are fewer drivers driving through that intersection. And no, the traffic counts show that in every case, the number of cars passing the intersection had increased, but the number of citations had decreased. That means drivers are doing something different. The fact that somebody said there's only 5% repeat offenders. I don't know if that's an accurate statistic or not, but I'd like for you.
I'm prepared, Mayor.
Okay, if you're prepared, but
when you're ready.
Then I'll shut up and let me hear what you've got to say about statistics.
Okay, well, thank you. I actually came prepared to update City Council because there's been a lot of talk, a lot of misinformation, and I really think it's a good idea that you kind of hear at least our side of the story that is important. First of all, talk a little bit about your statistics, because from day one, this program has obviously changed driver behavior. I have the first original 10 cameras. It was actually 10 cameras that we installed in 2008, and they are still up. And some of these numbers are estimates because, like, it was only about 7.5 months that they were up in 2008. But if you annualize it, in 2008, annualized, we had over 12,000 citations that were issued just in those 10 cameras. Let's go all the way to 2014. So far, we have 745, or if you annualize it, it's 2,235. Let me try to simplify it for people. The number of citations per month per camera the first year was 102 citations per month per camera. In 2013, a full year, it was 19 violations per month per camera. An 82% decrease in violations on those 10 original. If that's not a significant difference in behavior, then yes, we added 33 more cameras. And I want to point out, the reason that City Council and staff supported it was we were seeing the impact. We were seeing, boy, those numbers were really coming down. And that was really the focus, is that it was changing driver behavior. We were actually seeing a major impact on how many people were running red lights. And with the idea that every time somebody runs the red light, there's a potential that there's going to be a collision, because that means you've got a red and a green going at the same time. But out of those 43 cameras, in 2013, almost a full year, but I still annualized it, 25,000 citations were issued in 2013. That's 43 cameras compared to in 2008, where we had 10 cameras, we had 12,000. This is a little over doubled, but 4 times as many cameras. For, on average, 48 citations per camera per month. This year so far, 4 months, 4,520 citations. You times that by 3, you're 13,500. Just barely over what we had with 10 cameras, a little over 1,000 more, or about 26 citations per month per camera on average. The number of people running red lights in Palm Coast has gone down substantially. But Mayor, with that said, this program, when we started it, was designed to be something fairly simple. It was really designed to be almost like a high-cost parking ticket. It wasn't supposed to go to the what we call UTC, the Uniform Traffic Citation. It was intended to send the citation out. Our fee, our charge was $125. None of it went to the state. Looking at the impact, we continue that, but then it became very obvious that when the state, as I would call it, hijacked the program and substantially amended the program, it really started causing a real bite. And that's where, about a year ago, I commented to City Council about how, because of the way the state changed it, these citations can actually be transferred to the state system with a UTC, and people are finding they actually lose their license. Their license is suspended because they haven't paid it. And to get that back, that's over $400. That wasn't the intent. That was never the intent. That City Council at that time thought this was not going to in any way impact people to that degree. So, recent events. Trying to get back to what the city's goal was, and that is just change driver behavior and not have the system go through the courts and people having to go to court, having to pay the additional fines. We actually worked out something with the clerk of the court and the court system to try to keep people out of the UTC system. The way it works is that today, if you get a citation, you pay $158, or you can appeal that to a hearing officer who then looks at the information and determines whether or not you were in violation or not. And if you do one of those two things, then you're done. If you ignore it, or you don't receive the citation, or you receive and don't know it and throw it in the recycle bin, 60 days goes by, and it goes on to the state system, the UTC. Now you're in the court system. It's out of the city's hands. What was happening is in the state, through the county, has a notice that goes out. And I don't know exactly who sends it, because once it gets to the state system, I don't know exactly who sends that notice out. But a notice goes out that you now have a real traffic ticket. And now you have to pay, and the fee goes up over $200. People come in to the clerk of the court's office, and we're saying, I didn't receive the first notice. So our agreement is that if they stated they did not see the first citation or notice for the citation, then the courts sent the people to our offices, and we had an agreement that said if they agree to pay the $158, then as per allowed by law, we would accept their explanation that they did not receive the first notice, and therefore they were, by law, could have their UTC dismissed. So what we were doing is every time this happened, we would send in to the courts, please dismiss. It's a request for dismissal. And the courts would send back a response as, we received it, we'll process it accordingly, something to that effect. And we've been doing this for about a year, and it accomplished one of our goals, is not to have it go through UTC and have the fees become excessive and still get people's attention. Last month, we did it. We had a handful of people, a dozen or so, that came in. We went through that process. We submitted the request for dismissal, and the courts denied it. Unbeknownst to us as to why, have no idea why, but they denied the request to dismiss it. And instead of just dismissing it through the hearing officer, they set it for a hearing in front of a judge. Court system, we haven't any idea as to why. So then that's when we're back to, if you're going to lose your license, I've stated public many times, and my opinion is that this isn't what the city signed up for. This isn't the city's intent. We need to figure out some way to try to make sure that we don't have the excessive fines and that people are losing their license, because that was never the intent, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. And so also what's happened is that I have received individual requests from council members asking what would be the terms of terminating or reducing the length of our contract with the vendor who actually operates the system, ATS. And we started that conversation. It was kind of ironic. We started that conversation just before we got the phone call from the court saying, we're no longer going to dismiss these. You need to come to court. So still have been in contact with ATS, and we'll set up a time where we can talk about that, as some of you have requested. There's a variety of possible options, and we're not ready to discuss what those are, but it could be shorter term, it could be fewer cameras, it could be how do you eliminate the program altogether, and that would be something that would be a public policy, and City Council would have to decide how they want to proceed. And we will present that to you as soon as we work that out with ATS. Last statistic that I think is critical, because I heard a recording from the judge that indicated that if the reason the city wanted people to come pay the $158 versus the UTC is because the city made more money. That is false. And there's one of the reasons why it makes no sense to us to fight this is because when it gets to UTC, the city makes $0. I can't get these guys over here to use that term. $0 when it goes to UTC. The city receives $0 and put in our coffers. Let me explain how it works, and I'm going to explain it a little differently than what I've done before. The state law says the cities cannot receive revenue based on the number of citations that are issued. It has to be a flat amount. So, and our contract with ATS is the city receives $700 per camera per month, no matter how many citations are issued, but it's aggregate. So what happens is when someone gets a citation for $158, 75 of it is for the city, 83 of it goes to the state. But the city is interesting because we don't have any capital dollars. They aren't our cameras. They are ATS's cameras. And therefore, ATS obviously, and they operate the system. So they get a portion of the city's $75. In essence, what we do is the first 401 citations every month, the city gets the full $75. The $83 goes to the state, and we don't see anything. But the first 401 citations, the city gets the full $75. Once we get to 402, city gets $0, ATS gets the full $75. Average right now for 2014 is about 1,100 citations per month in our system. Well over 2 times the 401. Therefore, all of those that go to UTC, which are a month later, 2 months later, excuse me, they're 2 months later, we're not going to see any of those dollars. Anything that's paid, whether it's $150 to $58 to the city, $158 to the courts, $200, $400, the city gets 0 of it. ATS, our vendor, gets $75. The rest goes to the state. And how that's divided up, there's a formula, and I'm really not that familiar with it. The other statistic is we've heard 5%. The statistics that we have is that it's a little over 90% of the people who get a citation don't get a second one, don't have a repeat offender. And I was going to put that in. But not only do we see the number of citations coming down as much as 82% since we started this, we also see very few second offenders. In my ideal world, what I've advocated is a first citation should just be a warning, a friendly reminder, don't do it again. And I think that would be the ideal, but that's not what the state will allow. And it's not an option to us from the state process. So in summary, we we'll have conversations with ATS so I can report back to City Council what some of your options are. But also, we'll obviously, with the help of our city attorney's office, be responding to the court, because the court has a lot of questions, has misinformation, as one of the speakers indicated, and we need to make sure they understand how the system works and how the dollars flow, et cetera, and try to come up with a solution that reduces the divisiveness of this issue, because it is very divisive. It works, but it right now doesn't feel fair to people, and therefore it doesn't work in people's minds. So that's my presentation I had scheduled today, Mayor. Thank you.
On a different topic, we had one speaker talk about shuttle buses or a way for outlying communities to take advantage of Sunrail and other such public transportation.
I have not heard of a proposal, so do not know of any. Obviously, the public transportation system in Flagler County is run by the county, and that would be the kind of the place I would start.
I guess this would be like Votran. Mr. Di Lorenzo, you are our representative to the River to the Sea Transportation Planning Organization. Would you care to pursue this on our behalf?
I could, but I can also add a little to it. Okay, Votran is working on a plan to shuttle or bus people to the Sunrail stations. And they also have some buses in and around DeLand, DeBarry, Deltona area to get people to the Sunrail stations. So this is a county function, though, public transportation, so it would be better there. But I guess I could, talk to them at the TPO about perhaps there's an opportunity for us to link up with Votran once they get their shuttles heading out to Sunrail. But I did want to point out one thing about Sunrail that I think many people, including myself, didn't realize 2 weeks ago. Sunrail is a commuter rail, and it runs Monday through Friday, and it's for getting people to work. And I was all ready to go give it a try on a weekend and head down to Orlando. And guess what? You can't do that. At least not at this time.
Okay. This brings us to discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. Mr. Ferguson, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you. I don't think we're going to solve the red light camera issue here tonight, but I think a couple of things are worthwhile to understand, at least from my perspective. Number one, there's an independent referendum petition drive, and I assume that with a certain number of signatures that achieved by a certain time, that it must be put on the ballot. I like to understand that. Secondly, if that isn't successful, a decision by the City Council could also put that on the ballot for referendum, and when would that have to be decided in order to be put on the ballot? And I guess I'd like to also add, if in fact we can quantify the cost of canceling the contract because a referendum supported that, would it be also appropriate to put on that referendum, the taxpayers would have to incur the cost of getting out of the contract at some point in time? Those are my comments about that.
Mr. Reichman, could you comment on the ways that a referendum can be generated?
Certainly, and that's in our charter, and it's also provided by common law and state law in Chapter 101 of the Florida statutes. As far as our charter goes, it provides a process for an initiative, or also called a referendum, and it provides that if at least 25% of the electorate that voted in the last election sign a petition, then that petition, and the petition would contain that they want to either amend the charter or to propose an ordinance or to revoke, repeal an ordinance, that has to come back to the City Council. And the City Council has two options. They either can pass an ordinance that would submit it to the voters to amend the charter, if that's what the petition would be for, but of course that's not what we're talking about tonight. Or the council could agree with the petition and pass an ordinance consistent with what the folks wanted to sign the petition, which in this case would be to repeal the ordinances which amended our code to create our red light camera process consistent with the Mark Wendell Act. Or the council could choose not to, in which case, if the council did not abide by the petition, did not revoke our red light camera system, then, by operation of our charter, that decision would go to the voters in November. Now, I'll defer to the city clerk as far as when the deadline would be for that to get to the supervisor of elections. I believe it's in June, but I'm not sure when that is.
The petitions are due to the supervisor of elections noon, May 19th.
Okay, I misspoke. I knew it was soon. I knew it was soon, real soon. So, that certainly, and if the referendum passed, then that would be something that
It would be binding on.
It would be binding, absolutely. Now, there's another option, and that's called an advisory referendum, or a straw vote. Straw vote. You've probably heard it called a straw vote or an advisory referendum. And that's something that cities sometimes do when they're looking for public input, and they make a determination. They think that's the best way to try to find out from the public what the public's preferences would be. So that would be something that the city could do different than and apart from the charter process, Mr. Mayor, that I just described. That would be something that the city could do on its own initiative, to use that term. And yes, there would be consequences that would have to be worked out if the city made efforts or took steps to end the red light cameras in Palm Coast, because the city of Palm Coast.
Mr. Ferguson's question was, what's the procedure in terms of a referendum? So,
okay, I hope I answered that question.
Dave, did that answer your question?
Yes.
More? Anything else? Mr. Ferguson? Mr. DiLorenzo?
Can I add one thing? I'm sorry, excuse me. The referendum language, should it be like a city-initiated referendum? That ballot language would be due June 20th.
One of them's petition, the other one is an ordinance by city council. The petition's due May 19th, and the ordinance, if city council chooses to do it, would be June 20th. Is that
correct?
Summarizing? Okay.
Mr. DiLorenzo?
Yes, you mentioned the TPO, Transportation Planning Organization. We're doing a survey, a citizen survey. It's not terribly long. It takes maybe four or 5 minutes to do, and it's for us to get information about your wants and needs and problems, issues that you have with transportation, transit in the region, and it will help us with long-range planning that we're getting ready to do. And just today, city staff put a button on our homepage. It's kind of a aqua color, I guess, and it says River to Sea TPO, take the survey. So if you just click that, it loads right to the survey, and then you can take it and be done. If you wish to provide your name, you'll be eligible for you'll be entered into a raffle to win a prize. If you don't wish to enter your name, that's fine too. You don't have to. So I ask that you take the survey and help us out there. That would be helpful. And we're going to try to get the word out a little bit more through the press in the coming days. On red light cameras, Mr. Landon, it's not going to be in ATS's favor to want to sit down or expedite any meetings. I would assume they're not going to be anxious to do that, I would imagine. Is it a possibility to suspend the program to kind of get them to the table, or if they're unwilling to come to the table soon, is there a potential to suspend the program to get them to come to the table?
Well, first of all, met with them last week for the first time. And then just today, their attorney was trying to get a hold of our office. They have been very responsive. That it may not be in their best interest, you may not like their answer, but they have never delayed, and they are actually trying to get a hold of us as early as today. So, and then as far as can we legally suspend them, it would be in violation of the contract, so then you'd have contractual issues that they could enforce on the city. But I don't, I really don't think they would delay the process of coming up with an answer as to what it would take to get out of the contract, and we'll pursue that. So that's just my opinion. And if they do start delaying it, then we might have to try other tactics.
Okay, that's fine.
Anything else? No. Mr. Lewis had to leave. He offers his apologies.
I think we should talk about this, what Mr. Ferguson brought up relative to a referendum. I think would be a good conversation to have in a workshop, maybe even the next workshop, because I need to know more about what the city can and cannot do. I see the red light camera program as something that's good for our citizens. I supported it before. I support it now. I will not support unilaterally canceling the contract with ATS because I don't want it on my conscience that somebody's loved one was killed by a red light runner when I had a chance to do something about it. And the other thing is that a referendum, I would support a referendum. Good Lord, Big Ben is here.
That's what happens when you use your phone for a timer.
Oh, sorry, my 3 minutes are up. I would support a referendum. I mean, if the majority of the electorate in the city of Palm Coast say, we don't want them and we don't care what happens once they're gone, then I can abide by that. But I'm not going to initiate and practice or suggestion that the city just dismiss them, but I would support a referendum. I just don't know enough about how it goes about happening.
And if I could add to that, what the costs or consequences of the contractual arrangement needs to be part of that conversation.
Well, yeah, absolutely needs to be part of it, because regardless of whether the referendum is initiated by this city council or by a group of citizens, the dollar amount is going to be the same. And I would hope that people that if a person recognizes that we have a lot of unsafe drivers in the city of Palm Coast, sadly, and if there are no red light cameras, the only alternative that I know of is to put more deputies on the street at $106,000 apiece, which means we got to raise taxes to do it because we can't keep our budget flat and pick up a cost like that. Now, I'm not saying the decision should be made strictly on dollars and cents, because there are dollars and cents issues that the city council has to deal with, and then there are moral obligations that the city has to deal with. And in my view, I see this as something we need to do for the safety and well-being of our citizens. I felt this way 2 years ago. I feel that way today. And I haven't heard anything that would dissuade me from that. I drive these streets. My wife drives these streets. There are too many whacked out drivers out there. If you come to one of these code board hearings, and they're free, the public can come, you can't say anything, but you can watch these people on video going through these things, and on a right turn on red light, when you watch them and you don't even see the brake lights come on, I mean, come on, this is good. And it's not me, it's all those other people, you know. It's enough it's a very sobering experience, because people will stand up in front of that big screen and watch what they did and offer you the craziest reasons in the world why they had to do that. My brakes failed, you know, I was going to the hospital, I was doing this, I was doing that. Well, can you show evidence of that? And if they can, we throw it out. Right. But more often than not, it's just like if an officer pulls you over, you try to talk yourself out of a ticket, you know.
Yeah, the people who review these, it really is, I think sobering is a good term. It's amazing to see.
I mean, some of these are so blatant. You know, the light is red 8 seconds before you even got to the line, and you went through it.
If I could use this as an opportunity also to explain something that I hear a lot of false information about, and that is that you don't have to be all the way through the intersection in order to have, you know, not run the red light. Your front bumper just has to be over the stop bar. So you just have to be barely entering the intersection, and then you're good and you don't get a citation.
Yeah. If you cross that line and the light turns from yellow to red, you're not going to get busted.
Right. Right. So then you have the rest of the time on red to get through the intersection. Yep. And that is why you really have to consciously in my opinion,
Well,
attempt to run it.
You have to drive defensively.
Yep.
The only other thing I have, Your Honor, is for those that are interested, Senator Ron DeSantis will have his team out at the, what's the name of the Taj Mahal? Government Services Center out on 100 most of the day tomorrow, and will entertain conversation or questions from anybody from the public. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Well, as all of you, I'm sure, are very well aware, the legislature has adjourned for the year. And I believe all of you received something from the Florida League of Cities, which was a report of the bills that passed and the bills that did not pass. Very curious of the ones that did and the ones that didn't. Separate discussion. Of course, now we have to make sure that the governor signs them. They're not law until the governor signs them. But between now and next Tuesday, I'm hoping to stay abreast of those that the governor signs and be able to be prepared to report to you about those bills that can affect Palm Coast. And answer any questions that you may have. Be prepared to talk about some of the consequences. There's issues that would affect those of us sitting up here about ethics and having to go to some classes and changes we make on our forms that we file in Tallahassee every year and things like that. And we're looking into that. The other thing, and it really doesn't affect the city of Palm Coast, but I'm sure you've read about it in the newspaper, and it was an interesting decision, came out of not Tallahassee, but Washington, the United States Supreme Court. Involved a town about our size, actually, in New York, state of New York, is the city of Greece, not over there on the Adriatic, but in New York, and they had been having it's a community, small community that has a large it's predominantly a Christian-based community, and they had for years and years and years had been having prayers, which of course we don't have, prayers to start their governmental sessions, and they had been exclusively Christian prayers, and some people challenged that, saying that was an establishment of religion and therefore violated the United States Constitution. And the United States Supreme Court ruled that that was not an establishment of religion. Having said that, it was in a 5-4 majority. And that ruling really is not inconsistent with the constitutional case precedent that existed out there. It moved it along. It moved the bar a little bit along. But interestingly enough, the justice that wrote for the majority did create some parameters, and I'm going to be going, the extent that you all want to hear it. I mean, we don't face that, but it's an interesting case. And the judge created some parameters, some additional standards and parameters for local governments that do want to abide by that ruling. So that just came out this week. And, of course, you can imagine in my world there's a lot of discussions going on about that ruling. I guess just one last thing, just obviously we've got a hearing later this month on the judge's ruling and the red light cameras, and I just wanted to make sure that the record's clear. The city's going to fully comply with the court order, and provide the documents and the information that's requested, and where our office has been working diligently since that order came out, and we'll be submitting a memorandum to the court that speaks to a lot of the factual issues that the court raised that have been discussed by your city manager and more. So that we hope that the judge will be fully educated, and there won't be the need for the hearing later this month, because we believe that based upon all of the information that's all that should need to happen. So that's my report.
Discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
You've already received my report that I was prepared for, so you all have a good evening. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
I move we adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you for your attendance and participation.